Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. And we have in today the chairman of the board, David Reed, out, which means David James is in. Hello, David James.
What's going on, buddy?
Oh, boy, I will tell you. Nothing. I will say this. I got excited last night. I've been crapping on the NBA Finals, I know. I got excited last night watching the NBA Finals, I'm not going to lie.
We love to hear that.
It was an entertaining, good basketball game. I enjoyed it. So I'm just going to be honest with everybody out there that I've been crapping on the NBA for the last couple of weeks. I watched the game last night. It was good, competitive, entertaining basketball. And I think I'm rooting for Tyrese Halliburton and Indiana. Because all those players in the Athletics Players Poll came out and said that Tyrese Halliburton was the most overrated player in the NBA. And, boy, he's putting a foot up everybody's ass right now in these NBA playoffs. So I got into it last night, not going to lie. Now, I'm not like Joe Rexrode, and I'm not going to proclaim that the product is better today than it's ever been. But, again, he can do that on his own time. So Titans mandatory minicamp is over, which means now the next time the Titans convene, apparently it'll be July 22nd, and that's the start of training camp. But there's one thing when it comes to the 2025 Titans that I also felt about the 2024 Titans, and that was they're probably not going to be very good. You know that. That's not any news to you that I think that. But there is a difference that I feel like I also have been able to grasp about the 2025 Titans as compared to the 2024 Titans. And that difference is I think the Titans know they're not going to be very good in 2025. I think they know that this team isn't very good right now, and they're not going to be very good. Now, are you going to hear Mike Borgonzi or Chad Brinker do a bunch of gaslighting podcasts between now and the start of camp? I don't think you're going to hear that. They're not going to come out. They're not going to say, even if they believe that they're not very good, they're not going to come out and say, guys, we're not going to be good this season. This is going to be a rebuilding year. This is going to be a big kick in the teeth. They're not going to say it, but I think they know it. And this is a rarity in the NFL. Because between both the Titans and most of the teams in the league, they usually don't accept their fates in June. Just off the top of my head, the last team that I can really remember being like, hey, we are rebuilding, period. The last team I can remember really going all in on that was Arizona in 2023. They were 4-13. And didn't fire the coach and didn't fire the general manager and didn't fire the coordinators and didn't fire because they expected they were going to be 4-13. Remember, they released DeAndre Hopkins because they're like, well, we don't need to pay him. We're not going to be good this year. But that was a special set of circumstance because Kyler Murray had torn his ACL the year before, so they were going to pay him $46 million to rehab the whole year anyways, so they knew they were going to have Colt McCoy or whatever Scarbini at quarterback, so they knew they weren't going to be very good, and it was easy for them, I think, to accept being 4-13. They draft Marvin Harrison Jr., Kyler Murray returns, they go 8-9 last year, and now I think Arizona feels like they're on their way. The Cleveland Browns, they're not going to settle for being bad. Even though they were bad last year, even though at quarterback, John Madden used to say, if you've got two quarterbacks, you really have no quarterbacks. They apparently have four quarterbacks, which means they have no quarterbacks. They're not going to settle for being bad. Kevin Stefanski, he knows we got to win. Andrew Berry knows we got to win. They're paying Myles Garrett all that money because they want to win. The New York Giants, they will fire the coach and they will fire the general manager if they're bad this year. And they probably will be. They brought in Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston to try to bridge the gap where they can win enough games to save their jobs while drafting Jackson Dart, whom they hope to develop into their long-term starter. But the Titans, and I don't know about Callahan, But as far as Borgonzi and Brinker and the hierarchy is concerned, and again, I think this also includes ownership, I don't think a 4-13 season is going to have them turn on him or Brinker or the direction of the club the way in the past they have so abruptly turned on John Robinson, Mike Vrabel, and Rand Carthon. And to be honest with everybody out there, I know it's the offseason. And during the offseason, especially this time of the year, this is when everybody wants to get excited. This is when everybody wants to think, oh my God, we are going to be so good this season. Oh my God. Yes, this is our year. I remember as a kid, every time, even when the Titans were picked poorly, I was like, what if this is the year? I mean, I know Dr. Z in Sports Illustrated doesn't have us picked high, but what if this is the year? I know. But I actually think it is refreshing to believe that the Titans aren't on this gaslighting tour the way that they were last year, where every day was kumbaya and every little issue with the football team was, you're a hater, Jared. Let Rand cook. I trust Bill Callahan more than I trust you. Bill Callahan. He'll get PT ready to go. I find it refreshing that it feels like the Titans can look in the mirror and actually smell the coffee this year. Hey, we're not going to be very good. We drafted a young quarterback. It's going to take time for him to become successful. TD's going to be in for the power hour at 4 o'clock. It does not sound like Cam Ward had a good day today out at minicamp. It's going to take time for them to get better. And this isn't something that somebody over there said to me. It's just a vibe that I have gotten from the team, a vibe I have gotten from their press conferences, from the way that they talk about this team, the vibe I get from just being around there at minicamp the other day. Again, I think it's refreshing that the Titans can look in the mirror and actually see the truth for once, which for the last couple of seasons, they couldn't do. It was all oh, no, you'll see, Jared. Andre Dillard, he can play left tackle. And the reason he's struggling in minicamp is because Arden Key is so good. And that's just not coming out around here. And so, while I feel like this is an understanding that they've accepted, I actually think this is a good thing. And while I would prefer, I would prefer the Titans to be good. I remember what it was like when we used to do radio during the season when the Titans were good. And the topics were, well, how good are they compared to Kansas City and Buffalo and Cincinnati and Baltimore when they were legitimately competing with those teams? It was so much fun. So while I'd prefer that, I'm at least okay with the Titans admitting to themselves that, well, hate to say it, they're not very good, because that's the truth. And if there's one thing that's been an issue for me, as far as the Titans are concerned over the last couple of years, it feels like oftentimes lately, the truth has gone ignored over at St. Thomas Sports Park. So when it comes to this season, again, I know that minicamp just wrapped up. I know every single team in the league is going to talk about how at the beginning of camp, they're in the best shape they've ever been in. They feel like they really attacked the offseason. They feel great about where the team is headed. They feel blah, blah, blah. There'll be a video of a quarterback throwing to a receiver. Oh my God, look at Tua. Trust me, if we can do the, oh my God, look at Will Levis, you can do that about anybody. But I think this year, unlike last year, and unlike the year before that, the Titans know we're not very good. And it's going to be painful. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. But that's okay. Because again, the first step in fixing a problem is admitting that you have that problem. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Again, I was not at minicamp today. I am fascinated by what happened. TD will be here at 4 o'clock. Gentry Estes did text me, his kind of breakdown of what he saw at Cam Ward. So we'll get to that. 615-737-1025. But coming up next on the program, there is something Brian Callahan was asked, and his answer felt kind of gobbledygookish, but also kind of revealing. And I want to get to that next. 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game.
Brian, we've talked a lot about lessons from last season, how it's affected the offseason approach for the players. How has it affected you as a coach, the lessons you take from last year? How has it affected the staff? Or do you find you're going about this job differently or no?
Yeah, there's definitely some things I go about it differently. I still think I'm pretty true to who I am as far as my interactions with people and players and the staff. But there's a different urgency that goes on here for me, for how I deal with the staff in particular. I think a lot of the things I've learned, I've tried to put into practice. It's one thing to like reflect and say, oh, I could have done this and this better. I've been pretty intentional about doing the things that I think we needed to change. I've sort of attacked those things, and they've been a part of my daily interactions and process. And a lot of it was kind of through this offseason program that we developed, and how do we best win football games, and how do I best put our team in position to do that? How do I coach that better, and how do I do a better job from a leadership perspective for our players and our staff? So there's a lot of things that go into that, but I think I've not strayed too far from who I am and how I interact, but I've also been really focused and intentional about what needed to be better.
That was a long bunch of what felt like nothing. So Gentry has to ask the question, hey, we've talked about changes. We've talked about how tough last year was. What about you? How tough was last year on you, coach? And he's like, yeah, it was tough. It changes. He's like, and, I feel like I've got a more sense of an urgency with the staff. But then everything else after that, it just kind of felt like words. And so I don't really know what all of that meant. Like when he's sitting there talking about how, well, there's a different urgency with how I handle the staff. What does that mean? So all I can go off of when it comes to Brian Callahan is what I've seen from afar. Now, I've told you, I think the Titans, ownership on down, I think they believe this team is not going to be very good this upcoming season. That they have just accepted it, that they know this is going to be a rebuilding year, that it's going to be a tough season. I also don't think that Brian Callahan can accept that, because if he does, he's going to get fired. So he's got to surprise people with how they perform on the field. And yet what I've seen from afar, now that the offseason is over, I just don't really think Brian Callahan's any different than he really was last year. I don't think a lot has changed with the coaching staff. Again, yes, Colt Anderson out, Bones Fossil in, but that's just the special teams coach. Same offensive coordinator, same quarterbacks coach, same defensive coordinator. Again, when you're adding a Mike McCoy, and that's the only difference, I'm not sure that's really that big of a deal to me. I feel like they've pumped too much sunshine this year. Once again, everybody's good. Everybody's doing great. Everybody's in great shape. Everybody's working hard. Everybody's working together. Everybody's a leader. Jeffrey Simmons is doing great. Is he there? Nope. How can you take that seriously? And maybe behind the scenes this year, Brian Callahan is different. But if he is, I haven't seen it, and I haven't heard it. Brian Callahan this time last year got the benefit of the doubt because he was new, and we hadn't seen him go 3-14 as a coach. I'm sorry, but you don't get the benefit of the doubt 2 years in a row. The Titans were bad, and I knew that they were going to be bad, but that doesn't really excuse what actually happened, because I thought, quite frankly, last year there were a bunch of instances in which Callahan and this coaching staff, in my opinion, displayed poor coaching. For example, I don't think Callahan did a very good job of holding anybody accountable last year, especially in training camp. We all remember the Simmons fight, but what drove me crazy was there was one day where Will Levis threw an interception on the first pass of the 2-minute drill against Seattle, and that was it for the offense. Not a get your ass back out there and fix it, but you did your best. We'll get better tomorrow. Treylon Burks was a non-factor in training camp. And I kept saying, hey, if DeAndre Hopkins is going to be out, then they need to compete with NWI and Treylon Burks. And instead, it was just given to Burks. Because, again, they don't hold people accountable over there. Last year, I don't think Brian Callahan did a very good job of identifying insurance plans. You know, in case Nicholas Petit-Frere, who, again, Bill Callahan was going to turn into Trent Williams, in case he's not very good, what are we going to do? And the answer was they didn't have one. By week 3, they knew they were screwed at right tackle. By week 2, they knew they were screwed at quarterback. They experimented too much last year and too much failed. J.C. Latham at left tackle, Jamal Adams. And quite frankly, I don't think Callahan, as far as the season was concerned, inside the games, I don't think that he and his coaching staff strategized very well. I mean, how do you give up 350 yards on the ground to Indy? How do you let Malik Willis come in here and beat you the way Malik Willis came in here and beat them? And quite frankly, I don't think they did a very good job of setting fan expectations. Going on podcasts saying we're going to surprise people and Will Levis is everything you want in a quarterback and he's a big reason why I took the job. And again, Denard Wilson, you listen to his press conference, everybody's headed to Canton. I expected to see a different Callahan this offseason. I still expected Callahan to be a nice guy, and I still expected Callahan to be a good guy, but I expected Brian Callahan to be a little tougher. I expected Brian Callahan to hold people a little bit more accountable. I expected that we would see Brian Callahan, instead of everything being so rosy and so sunshiny and so gorgeous and so awesome and so everything, I expected to see Brian Callahan at least a little bit push some buttons. I expected to see major coaching staff changes. Again, how do you be as bad as they were last year on offense and bring the offensive coordinator back and bring the quarterback's coach back? And how could you be as bad as they were on defense last year and bring the defensive coordinator back and bring all the assistants for the most part back? So I expected major staff changes, given that, again, it kind of felt like Callahan kept his job by the skin of his teeth. And instead of major staff changes, they changed the special teams coach and they hired Mike McCoy to be a senior advisor. So I keep wondering, what's changing? What's different? I expected a sterner, I have to be more of an a-hole because Mr. Nice Guy didn't work out last year approach from Callahan. And instead, it feels like more of the same. Orange slices and Capri Suns. Lollipops and rainbows. Again, we're going to have a tough competition this offseason, and the winner doesn't even know what they're going to get. But it's going to develop leadership. And by the way, our team captain last year isn't coming for any of it. Again, last year, that tone, everything's great, everything's going to be great, we're all friends. Barney didn't work last year. And yet, I get from Callahan and Denard Wilson that apparently L'Jarius Sneed, he's doing great in spite of the fact that he's still hurt and he's allegedly facing criminal charges and a grand jury potential indictment for a role in a auto dealership shooting. So it feels like to me, the only thing that's really changed this offseason with Callahan is the 8-team accountability thing. And again, I don't really know how big of a deal that actually is. It sounds good. We're going to play rock, paper, scissors, and we're going to compete. But I don't think that really wins in the NFL. Suffice to say, now that we've got the OTAs and we've got mini camp and all these things pre-training camp kind of in the vault, and we've seen, okay, we remember what Callahan was in year 1. We know how much of an abject failure that was. Well, now we're into year 2. Again, I expected to see changes from Callahan. I didn't see him. I expected to hear a different tone from Brian Callahan. I didn't hear it. So, again, I think this team's going to be bad, and I think they think this team's going to be bad, and they're okay because I think they'll be okay with a rebuild. But I just don't think Callahan's getting the job done. And there had to be changes after last year. And again, the Titans, they were saying, hey, Brian will be the first one to tell you they got to make changes. And again, it was the special teams coach and the 8-team competitive accountability thing, and Jeffrey Simmons didn't even show up. So, again, I'm rooting for Callahan, but I think I think OKC at the beginning of the NBA Finals was minus 700 to win the NBA Finals. I'm going to go like minus 1,000. I think Callahan's getting fired at the end of the year. And quite frankly, I think he'll deserve it. I like Callahan. He's a good guy. He's a good man. But again, it's time to be an a-hole. It's time to hold people accountable, and I just don't think he can do it. And I didn't see a single thing this offseason that makes me think he can do it. 615-737-1025 to your phones coming up next. Plus, we do have an update as far as that 8-team competition is concerned. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5 The Game.
I'll kind of share with you guys the same message I share with our team, that I just appreciate their attendance. I appreciate their buy-in, the work that we put in. We're a better football team now than we were when we started. And I'm excited about getting ready for training camp. The guys have really, it's been competitive. It's been intense. We've gotten a lot of great work in over the course of the offseason program. And that ultimately doesn't guarantee us anything. And so we got a lot of work still ahead of us. We got a whole training camp to go. But I like where we're at. I'm appreciative of the effort that's been put in, and I'm excited to wrap this up today. We got I think we got 3 teams, maybe a 4th team sort of in the running on this last day. 2 teams are only separated by a point here and with one to play. So it should be pretty competitive for this guys trying to finish off the offseason on a high note.
Okay, so Brian Callahan just gave us an update on this great 8-team accountability, off-season teamwork building, leadership development bullcrap, the corporate gobbledygook or whatever. And he says, there's still a couple of teams that have a shot at winning the title. And remember, Tony Pollard, when this first came out, Tony Pollard was asked, so what does the winning team get? He's like, I don't know. And so I thought that thing was a joke from the beginning, but I thought this was going into training camp too. Like, I thought this was going to be more than just the offseason program. I thought in training camp, it was going to be throw an interception minus 3 points, throw a touchdown plus 3 points or whatever. But apparently it's just the offseason. So you mean to tell me this wasn't even a training camp thing? And Jeffrey Simmons was one of the team captains for this 8-team challenge, and he showed up for 3 days? Am I the only person on planet Earth who thinks this is so incredibly stupid? And the amount of people that when Callahan came up with this grand scheme to get them not to jump off sides and to line up correctly and to not get personal foul penalties and to not throw interceptions or fumble the ball, when I'm the only person on the planet, apparently, who thinks this is so stupid. And everyone's else like, well, he's got to try something. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe hold people accountable. Yeah, if you throw that interception, you're coming out. How about that? No. And then Jeffrey Simmons doesn't even go. What a crap show, in all seriousness. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And I'm telling you, again, they haven't said anything to me. You know that. But I get the vibe that Brinker and Borgonzi are like, okay, Brian. And then if it goes, where I think it's going to go and where I think they think it's going to go, then they'll just fire him and hire Mike McCarthy from Green Bay or Matt Nagy from Kansas City, the roots with Callahan or with Brinker and Borgonzi, one of those guys next year to take over. Adam in Portland's going to kick us off. Our phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Adam, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Jared, it's like a parallel universe listening to you on Sirius talk about basketball. It's
pretty crazy,
weird to me, man. Just so you know, you're doing a good job. I think Brighton's on the wall with that. You're doing good with them. Hey, so this is weird. So I think this is where I'm at with it, man. I hope Callahan does well. I don't think he's going to be good because the only thing he's had to look at is his daddy, and I don't think his daddy was all that good, honestly. Like, his daddy got a great opportunity in Oakland when he got it, and he didn't win it. And then he comes, I guess he's been a good O-line coach, but I would take Munchak 10 times over Callahan, which they talked about Callahan like he was on that level when we got him. And so I think it's just, I don't know. He got an undeserved opportunity because of who his daddy was, but I don't think his daddy was all that good. So I'm just kind of stuck with, we're going to have a pitiful year because these guys have not set up Cam, and this is not a special magical coach that's going to help Cam at all.
Yeah, again, it depends on what you're expecting because, and I appreciate your call, Adam, this team is not talented enough, even if Vince Lombardi was the coach, for them to be good. Like, I'm telling you, this team sucks. Like, this team, look at the tight ends. Like, this team is awful. And how are they going to get sacks? They sacked the quarterback 32 times, I believe, last year, and Harold Landry with 9 sacks was their leading sacker, and they cut him. Like, how are they going to get sacks? Listen to them talk about getting sacks. They act like it's some Einstein equation as to how they're going to do it. It's like, we know how you get sacks. Either you got the horses up front to go get them or you don't, period. So they're going to be bad no matter what. It has nothing to do with Callahan or his dad or any of that. That being said, I am a little worried it's going to be the same old crap it was last year. And it's going to hurt even worse watching it this year because they used the first overall pick on Cam Ward. Cam Ward, and I just saw this on Twitter, apparently Cam Ward today was asked about his confidence after practice. On a scale of 1 to 10, what's his confidence? And apparently he said 10. Okay. Again, this goes back to me last week saying you can't be that confident. You cannot be confident when you've never done it before. Well, but Jared, Cam, he's a dog. Again, you can be positive. You can be optimistic. You can't be a 10 out of 10. I'll never forget Tom Brady after he beat the Falcons in the Super Bowl, did a podcast with Peter King, and he's like, I have the answers to the test now. Yeah, well, after 20 years of sustained success, where you just overcame a 25-point second half deficit in the Super Bowl to go win your 5th Super Bowl, and you're the greatest player ever, yeah, okay, you can be a 10 out of 10 in confidence. But you can't be a 10 out of 10 in confidence when you've never taken a snap in the entire National Football League. One texter into the text line says, we'll keep being a poverty franchise and fire Callahan by the end of the season. Well, again, here's the thing about Callahan and firing Callahan. I understand that people today look at it and say, you're not going to get any better if you just keep firing people, which is actually something that I don't believe. And I will say this, I have told a very important person, actually I've told multiple very important people over at St. Thomas Sports Park who have said to me, you don't get better by firing people all the time. You can't get better if you just can't keep doing it. And I said to them, yeah, you can. The San Francisco 49ers, they fired Jim Tom Sula and hired Chip Kelly. And they fired Chip Kelly and they hired Kyle Shanahan. Worked out for them. The Houston Texans, they fired Bill O'Brien and they hired they hired David Culley. And they fired David Culley and they hired Lovie Smith. And they fired him, and they hired DeMeco Ryans. Worked out for them. You can fire until you find the right guy all you want. But, again, I understand why today you would think, oh, man, it's just they're going to tire fire if they fire Callahan. If you get in the season and you see the same things happening this year that were happening last year, you're going to say we have to fire Callahan or else there's no way that Cam Ward's going to be able to develop into a quarterback. That's what's going to happen. I've seen it 1,000 times. So that one's kind of tough. One texter says, I like the way of coaching, such as the beatings will continue until the morale improves. I don't know what that means. One texter says the Titans are now a JUCO team. I don't know about that. One texter says it's playoffs or Callahan's fired. The new general manager will want his own coach in there for sure. This whole thing about a new general manager gets me every time. Chad Brinker is in charge. Now, I know Borgonzi, they work together and that Brinker hired Borgonzi. And so if Borgonzi says he wants a player, I think Brinker's going to do it. And so if Borgonzi at the end of the year goes to Brinker and says, I want to get rid of Callahan, I think he's probably going to do it. They'll work together on that. But at the same time, Chad Brinker was a part of the group that hired Brian Callahan. And Chad Brinker's the one who gets the final call on whether or not they're going to fire Brian Callahan at the end of the year. That said, so I don't think it's a playoffs or bust kind of thing. I just think it's hey, it'll be the public pressure and they'll know, I think deep down inside, they know what I'm telling you about Callahan, which is he's too good. He's too nice. He's too goody two shoes. Goody two shoes. Goody two shoes. He's too nice. And everybody, this is the worst trend in sports. You fire the a-hole coach, you hire the nice guy. Because the a-hole was too mean, so you get the nice guy. Everybody's happy for 5 minutes. Then when it's time to fire the nice guy, you want a disciplinarian. It happens all the time. I mean, all the time. One texter says, out of all of the quarterbacks that Callahan has developed, how many of them were just because they were Peyton Manning? So that's, let's see, Peyton Manning, Matthew Stafford, Derek Carr. And I never thought Derek Carr was all that good. Peyton Manning, Matthew Stafford, Derek Carr, Joe Burrow, and Will Levis. I'll say this. I doubt Callahan's ability to develop quarterbacks. Like, I need to see success. I think I could have coached Joe Burrow. You know, Ed Orgeron did a podcast with Colin Cowherd when the Bengals made the playoffs. And he asked about Joe Burrow, obviously, when the Bengals made the Super Bowl. And he asked about Joe Burrow. And Ed Orgeron, I kid you not, Ed Orgeron goes, you know, when we brought him in on a recruiting visit, he said, come up to me and said, Coach, I don't care about anything except for I just want to eat crawfish and I want to talk football. I don't want to do the recruiting stuff. I was like, okay. So we got a bunch of crawfish and we sat down in the football office and there were about 10 of us in the room. And in 5 minutes, everybody in the room knew that Joe Burrow was the smartest guy in the room. Go Tigers. And I heard that and I'm like, you know what? That checks out. That checks out. That Joe Burrow is that kind of team. I think Joe Burrow's the coach of that team. I think Joe Burrow, we'll get to that team in a second because they're in the news again. I think Joe Burrow's doing everything he can to try to keep that team together. So I don't give Callahan credit for that. Callahan did not do a good job last year coaching this team and developing the quarterback. That is for sure. One texter says, Jared, can you play the cut from Denard Wilson? What cut? What cut from Denard Wilson? That I couldn't tell you. One texter says, how would Cam start getting developed better if Callahan were fired in the middle of the season? Who would develop him in the second half? So I do think there is a coach on staff that would take over. If Callahan got fired, I think they would make Mike McCoy the head coach. Mike McCoy is like a senior advisor. You know, he's a coach, but they don't have a spot for him. So I think that they would make Mike McCoy the head coach. He's been the head coach before, I believe, in San Diego. He was the head coach. I want to say Mike McCoy was, I want to make sure I get this right. Was Mike McCoy the head coach in Oakland? Regardless, I think that Mike McCoy would take over as the head coach, and he is an offensive visor-wearing, play-calling coach. So, again, I'm not worried about that. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. I did bring up Joe Burrow. There is a Bengals story out there that is so Bengals, it hurts. It hurts. And I've been waiting all week to talk about it. We'll do it next. Stillman & Company, 1025 The Game.
17th overall this year. I wish he would say what he really wanted to say. I don't know what he really wanted to say. I mean, look, he's not an employee of the Bengals right now. He's not under contract. He's no more employed by the Cincinnati Bengals, Chris, than you or me or anyone else out there who isn't currently employed by the Cincinnati Bengals. And I've explained this before. It's a very simple and specific dispute. It all comes down to the language that voids future guarantees. The current contracts, the prior contracts, including Amarius Mims last year, the tackle who was drafted 18th overall, one pick below Stewart this year, the T. Higgins and Jamar Chase contracts. The language in those contracts says if you commit a default, it wipes out your guarantee for the year when the default is committed. They want to change that language where, and this is the practical outcome, if you have a default, you void all future guarantees. Now, a lot of teams already have that. The Bengals didn't, though. The Bengals are trying to change their procedures with this one guy. And this one guy is saying, I'm not going to be the one who changes. Your past contracts are set up this way. That's all I want. I want the past contract. I want the same contract Amarius Mims got. I don't want to change that language. And when he says you're trying to win an argument, that's the point. They just want him to say, okay, I'll take whatever you put in front of me and I'll move on.
There you go. That was Florio. So there is a Bengal clown show going on right now in Cincinnati with their first-round pick, Shamar Stewart. You heard Florio kind of lay out there what the issue is. Basically, the language of the guarantees in the contract, all Shamar Stewart wants is what the guy last year got. But the Bengals are like, we're not going to give that to you. So sign it or else. And he's saying, no, I'm not signing this contract. And so Shamar Stewart left mandatory minicamp yesterday. Shamar Stewart is not under contract. He doesn't have to go to mandatory minicamp. He doesn't have to. And I got to tell you, Joe Burrow was asked earlier this week about the Trey Hendrickson situation. He's missing mandatory minicamp. And Joe Burrow said, of course it's a distraction. And so here's Joe Burrow. And here are the Cincinnati Bengals. And I started watching football in 1999. You know, again, I watched some football in 98 with the Oilers. I went to the Ryan Leaf game at Vanderbilt, but I really got into it in 99. And the first game I ever went to was the first game at the then Adelphia Coliseum, and it was the Titans versus the Bengals. They had Jeff Blake at quarterback, and the Titans won on an Al Del Greco field goal. I believe they won 36-35 or 35-34 or something like that. It was a wild game. And for my entire life, the Cincinnati Bengals have been absolute horse crap. My entire life. I will never forget when Corey Dillon ran for like 258 yards in a game and said, yeah, I want to leave. And Chris Collinsworth, who was a Bengal, said on TV, the Cincinnati fans are in jail and Corey Dillon's on parole. That's how bad it was. Now, they had some years there with Marvin Lewis and Ocho Cinco and Carson Palmer where they weren't awful. And they had a couple years with Andy Dalton where they weren't awful. But, I mean, again, of my lifetime, they've been one of the crappiest teams in the entire league. Then they get lucky enough to absolutely suck in the right year so they can draft Joe Burrow. They draft Joe Burrow. They get him hurt because they're so stupid. And that allows them to be able to turn around and draft Jamar Chase. So the Bengals, by default, got good because they had Joe Burrow on a rookie contract, Jamar Chase on a rookie contract, T. Higgins on a rookie contract, and there is a such thing as a salary floor. You do have to pay some players. So the Bengals did. They paid Trey Hendrickson. Signed him in free agency from New Orleans. In fact, in the Stillman and Company offseason program thing they do, I wanted to sign Trey Hendrickson that year. They signed Bud Dupree. Point, Jared. Again, the point here being Cincinnati lucked in to having what every other fan base outside of Buffalo, Kansas City, and Baltimore, and maybe Washington would beg to have. They've got a generational quarterback and a generational wide receiver. Package that with the NFL's leading sacker, and yet they can't win because their cheap-ass ownership won't pay. It's as simple as that. So on one hand, they've got to deal with Trey Hendrickson, who wants a new contract. And I understand Hendrickson reworked his deal a couple years ago. I understand Cincinnati saying, don't come to us every year, but the market is the market. And if you want to be a big boy, you get out in front, you pay your players. That's what Philadelphia does. Cincinnati won't do that. Now there's the Shamar Stewart thing. I think they drafted Shamar Stewart, and I think that was a terrible pick, by the way, because Shamar Stewart never sacked a quarterback in college. But I believe they drafted Shamar Stewart so they could ultimately move on from Trey Hendrickson. Because with Max Crosby getting $35 million a year and Myles Garrett getting 40, they're like, we can't pay that. And Hendrickson is the leading sacker in the NFL and is consistent as all get out. And so here's Cincinnati. And kicking and screaming, they paid the two receivers. Higgins, I mean, who knew where that was going to go? But they should have just paid him 3 years ago. They wouldn't have to worry about all the drama now, but they did it anyways. Chase, he said he was miserable last year. Now, he did end up with the Triple Crown, but he wanted a deal too. The point being here that if Cincinnati was a well-run business, they'd have a chance to be the Eagles. They'd have a chance to be better than Buffalo and Kansas City. Kansas City doesn't have Jamar Chase on their team. I mean, I remember the week of the playoff game where Tannehill threw the 3 picks, and Mike Vrabel was asked, about what do you think of the talent or what? So it was a question about Burrow and Chase. And Vrabel was like, well, when you're the first pick and the 4th pick, you usually have a Vrabel saying like, I can't get guys like that because I don't pick that high. And Cincinnati's going to ruin it. Like they're going to squander it. They are going to ruin this opportunity they have. This quarterback, those receivers, that sacker, they're going to blow it. They're going to get to 1 Super Bowl. They lost that Super Bowl. They're going to get to an AFC championship game. They're going to make the playoffs a couple more times, but they've blown it. They blew it. And they have Joe freaking Burrow. And they've blown it because they're so cheap and so stupid and so stuck in their ways. What a freaking joke. Matthew in Nashville says, have you ever seen something like this before with the Bengals? This morning it was reported by somebody from ESPN that if Stewart were to hold out the entire season, he could re-enter the NFL draft and be drafted by any team other than Cleveland. So that was the Eli Manning threat. If you don't remember what happened with Eli Manning and the Chargers, who technically drafted him, Archie said he's not going to play. And because we all knew that the Mannings had money and that Eli could sit out, we knew that was a legitimate threat. Again, I don't know how well you guys know Archie Manning, but if Archie Manning says something like that, Archie's not walking it back. Archie means business. That was the threat. Okay, San Diego, go ahead and draft us. If you draft us, we're not going to play, and then we'll get drafted next year. So that would be what Shamar Stewart would do here. It's always screwed up with the Bengals. They were on Hard Knocks one year, and they showed Mike Brown's daughter, who's like the de facto VP of player personnel there. And she was on the phone with Andre Smith, the tackle they drafted in the 1st round. And she was on the phone with the agents. And they were like, well, we just can't get to that Darius Hayward-Bay number. We just can't do it. And I'm pretty sure Andre Smith was picked like the pick before Darius Hayward-Bay. So they're saying, hey, we were picked before Hayward-Bay. We want Hayward-Bay's contract. And they're like, yep, nope, can't do it. Just typical Bengals. I think it's incredible. I feel so bad for those fans. They have good fans. That's a good fan base. And just run our team like a normal team. You don't have to run it like the Eagles, but just run it like a normal team. And they can't do it. 615-737-1025. That's our phone number. 615-737-1025. So the last couple of days have really put a stick up my rear end when it comes to the Titans. And it has to do with Jeffrey Simmons, but it doesn't have to do with Jeffrey Simmons' absence. It has to do with the one thing that Jeffrey Simmons is paid to do and he doesn't do. We'll get to that coming up next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game National Studios and presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. Titans minicamp wrapped up today. TD at the top of next hour. He was there today. It sounds like it wasn't a good day for Cam Ward, but we'll let TD tell us what he saw, not just today, but also over the 3 days. And we'll do that at the top of the hour, which, of course, we're looking forward to here on the program. I was there for day one, was on Sirius the last 2 days, so I'm not going to pretend that something happened because somebody told me it happened that I didn't see. We'll just go right to the source when TD gets here at 4 o'clock. So this Jeffrey Simmons discussion, I now think is kind of comical. Again, I think Simmons should have been at OTAs. I think it was disrespectful to the team that he wasn't there at OTAs. I don't think he had a valid reason not to be there at OTAs. And that's all at this point, I guess, water under the bridge. Who cares? But the one thing that really pisses Jeffrey Simmons off is whenever you ask Jeffrey Simmons why he doesn't get more sacks. And when you ask Jeffrey Simmons why he doesn't get more sacks, he basically tells you, I'm doing my job. I'm getting double teamed. Everybody else needs to do their job. Again, he doesn't say it like that, but read between the lines. That's what he's saying. And so Brian Callahan was asked yesterday about Jeffrey Simmons and his double teams, because again, the Jeffrey Simmons, I get double teamed media. And I know I look like some butthole every time I complain about it, but I'm getting double teamed, as if Aaron Donald never saw a double team in his entire career. Jeffrey Simmons has now made the double team thing such an excuse that it's now filtered its way to the head coach. And here's what Brian Callahan had to say about these double teams. And we're going to play this cut once. We may have to play it again, but go ahead, David, play the cut.
You talked a lot about being double teamed. Isn't every good defensive tackle in the league constantly double teamed, and aren't most of them overcoming that on a regular basis?
I think it's a little more nuanced than that. To sometimes yes, and sometimes no. Most really good interior players are getting a slide to them most of the time, so they have to deal with that. But I think one of the things that we can do a better job of collectively up front is our rush, working together better. Those things are areas of improvement for us, to where when you are getting double teamed, someone else is taking advantage of that opportunity and finding ways to get one-on-ones. You can structure your front different ways to keep slides off of guys, and you can structure your rush package to game off those slides. So I think we can do collectively a better job of putting guys in position up front to have more opportunities. And Jeff should benefit from that. Again, I think that's part of what I talked about earlier, just that outside linebacker group and defensive line group working together more often, meeting together more often, so we can do a better job balancing our rushes. We can do a better job gaming our rushes and getting guys in position to get one-on-one. So that's on us coaching wise too, to do a better job of that. So yeah, Jeff's going to get double teamed. He's not going to win all of them. Then there's going to be times where we got to help him find opportunities to get one-on-ones.
Okay. David, how long was that cut?
About a minute and a half.
Okay. I want to go over this again. Because, again, PK's question was, there's a lot of talk about Jeff and these double teams. Well, shouldn't Jeff beat the double teams? So let's start again. This is Callahan. Let's start this cut again, and then we're going to stop it, and we're going to go over some of the things that he said.
You talked a lot about being double teamed. Isn't every good defensive tackle in the league constantly double teamed, and aren't most of them overcoming that on a regular basis?
I think it's a little more nuanced than that. To sometimes yes, and sometimes no.
Okay. First thing he said right there, I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that. Again, we're sitting here saying, hey, shouldn't Jeffrey Simmons beat double teams and sack the quarterback? And he's saying, well, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. It's really not. Again, Aaron Donald probably got double teamed on every play. There's probably 50 to 60 defensive snaps. It's not like Aaron Donald got 60 sacks a game and beat the double team on every play. It is just that occasionally Aaron Donald beat the double team and then would sack the quarterback, and he would do that once or twice a game. Again, that's what you're asking Jeffrey Simmons to do. You're not asking Jeffrey Simmons to get a sack on every play. But again, this is what drives me crazy, is this part right here about, well, it's more nuanced than that. And then Callahan's explanation towards the end, David, if we could, towards the end, where Callahan starts talking about how, you know what, they need to meet together more. They need, as coaches, they need to emphasize it more. They need to work on it more. They need to blah, blah, blah. Let's play the end of this cut.
We can do a better job balancing our rushes. We can do a better job gaming our rushes and getting guys in position to get one-on-one. So that's on us coaching wise too, to do a better job of that. So yeah, Jeff's going to get double teamed. He's not going to win all of them. Then there's going to be times where we got to help him find opportunities to get one-on-ones.
Okay. So here's the real problem. Again, Callahan just said a bunch of words there about, well, you know, there are times with our rush lanes where we got to meet so that we're all on the same page, so that we got to blah, blah, blah. You want to know why the Titans don't get more sacks? And you want to know why Jeffrey Simmons doesn't get more sacks? Because the players they have on their team aren't good enough. That's why they don't get more sacks. Did you hear that? That wasn't a minute 30. Callahan's not going to say it. I don't know if Callahan knows it because, again, the Titans went out, added Draymond Jones and Femi Oladejo, and that's it. I mean, between the two of them, I think they equal Harold Landry's 9 sacks last year, and that's including sacks at UCLA. It's a little bit harder when you get to the NFL. But the Titans didn't actually do anything to help Jeffrey Simmons get sacks if Jeffrey Simmons himself is not going to beat the double team. And I know how important and how disruptive a legitimate defensive tackle, I mean a big old baddie in the middle, can be, because I watched Albert Haynesworth send an entire secondary to the Pro Bowl in 2008, and he only had 8.5 sacks. I mean, Albert Haynesworth led that team, and he only had 8.5 sacks, but everybody was getting sacks because Albert Haynesworth was such a monster. Number one, Jeffrey Simmons is not Albert Haynesworth. He does not play like Albert Haynesworth. What's crazy is he could be, but he's not. But the second thing, and this is the thing that really bothers me, is I feel like Callahan and Denard Wilson and everybody else, they have to come up with these long explanations as to why the Titans don't get more sacks. So they make it sound like it's some sort of arithmetic that's over my head. It's like sticking a calculus book in front of me and saying, find me the tangent and the cosine. What? How do I do that? But again, it's really not that complicated. It's sacking the quarterback. The Titans keep trying to explain this to us like we're morons that don't get the concept of, if Jeff Simmons is doubled, then other people need to go sack the quarterback. And that's because last year, if Jeffrey Simmons got doubled as much as they said he did, nobody else went and sacked the quarterback. So last year, we kept saying, why doesn't Jeff sack the quarterback more? Because, again, we're expecting Chris Jones and we're expecting Aaron Donald and we're expecting this type of high-end player with the way they treat him. And they kept saying, oh, well, Jeff is doubled. And I think, again, all of us logical, rational people kept sitting back and saying, okay, well, then shouldn't we expect somebody else to be sacking the quarterback? If T'Vondre Sweat is 360 pounds and eats up the middle, and Simmons is getting double teamed, shouldn't there be 2 edge rushers just coming off, going after the quarterback? And with the Titans, it's like, well, no. It's a little bit more complicated than that. No, it's not. No, it's not. But the problem is the Titans don't have people on their team that can sack the quarterback. So if Simmons is getting a double team and Sweat's eating up the middle, then the edge rushers should be going after the quarterback. The problem is your edge rushers stink. And what did the Titans do in the offseason to fix this problem? They didn't do anything. They cut their leading sacker, Harold Landry. So without his 9 sacks, the Titans had 23 sacks last season. Draymond Jones had 4. Femi Oladejo had 4.5 in college. So that's all they did to change the people around Simmons. Other than that, it's the same people. T'Vondre Sweat, Arden Key, Jalen Harrell, James Lynch. It's the same people. Sebastian Joseph Day. It's the same people. And so Callahan says, because, again, changing the personnel is no longer an option, and expecting Simmons to play better is no longer an option. So now the only thing he can come up with is, well, we need to get on the same page and we need to have meetings and we need to talk about it. Meetings are not why you didn't sack the quarterback last year. And then I have to ask, if meetings are why you didn't sack the quarterback last year, why didn't you have some meetings? Or why didn't you fire the defensive coordinator who apparently didn't coordinate enough meetings? That's all they've got, is that long-winded explanation of, well, it's more complicated than just Jeff didn't beat the double teams. And it is slightly more complicated. It is Jeff didn't beat the double teams. The other guys on the team weren't good enough to make up for the fact that Jeff couldn't beat the double teams, the same way Danico Autry could make up for when Jeff didn't beat the double teams. And we didn't do anything this offseason to go out and get anybody out there to go beat the double teams. So now our hope is meetings. That's our hope. Does anybody else think that is so incredibly stupid? Or is it just me? Again, for all you people out there that have wondered, wait a minute. If Tavondre Sweat gets doubled on every play and Jeffrey Simmons gets doubled on every play, why are there not more edge rushers coming free? And the answer is not scheme related. It's talent related. It's because the guys that they pay to sack the quarterback stink. And then they've done nothing to fix it. There's your answer. 615-737-1025 is the phone number, 615-737-1025. Gentry Estes wrote a column about Jeffrey Simmons and about not being at OTAs and needing to get more sacks and everything else. And I was just thinking about this the other day, because apparently I'm the bad guy now. As Jeff Simmons said, I'm the butthole when it comes to talking about Simmons not being there. Couldn't this have been really easily avoidable? All of the Simmons issues the last couple of days. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
What do you expect of him against double teams? Premier defensive tackles around the league.
Right. Well, look, is this when you get a double team, and if you know how to work, how the four guys work up front, it's 4 against 5. When you get the slide, all right, it's always either you work an edge or you work to split them. Because you got to understand this. Sometimes you have to split them, and the other guy gets the one-on-one. If you don't split them, now it's a hole where a quarterback can escape. So, like I said, Jeff's going to win, and he has been double teamed and won on double teams. But we have to do a better job up front, rushing together, being 4 against 5, all right, against their front, and then presenting certain packages to make it easier for him to win. Jeff's going to win against anybody. Jeff's a dominant football player. Every team in the National Football League would love to have 98 line up on their defensive line.
There you go. That was Denard Wilson sitting there saying, you know what? Jeff's so good. Everybody wishes they had him. He's going to get his sacks. Again, that sounds great. Here's the problem. He doesn't get the sacks. Again, the Titans act like there's some sort of answer to this. Like, hey, we didn't get any sacks last year, and we cut our leading sacker, and we drafted a guy in the second round who might be good, but again, he had 4.5 sacks last year in college. But trust us, we have the answers. It's like, no, here's the answer. The guys on your team last year weren't good enough to sack the quarterback. You didn't really go out and get anybody out there who's going to go sack the quarterback, so you're not going to get sacks this year. Like, do you understand that? You're not going to get sacks this year unless Femi Oladejo is everything in a bag of chips that they expected him to be. But they have to talk all these words because they have to, I guess, convince themselves that they might get sacks this year. I mean, it's crazy. And here's the other thing on the Jeffrey Simmons front that I do want to touch on, which is the issues with Jeffrey Simmons this week. Number one, we're talking about how he gets double teamed all the time. Why are we talking about how he gets double teamed? David James, do you want to take a stab as to why we are talking about the Simmons double teams, why Gentry's writing about it in the Tennessean, why Paul's asking about it? I'm sure Paul's going to have a story about it, but why Denard Wilson's talking about it and Brian Callahan's talking about it. And it's, hey, well, shouldn't he be beating these double teams? What about these double teams? Do you want to take a stab as to why this has become such a discussion?
You know, I'm just going to take a stab at this. I'm pretty sure just because Jeffrey Simmons is making a lot of money for this team.
And he's making a lot of excuses.
Exactly.
And that's his excuse. So Simmons makes the excuse of, well, I'm double teamed. They game plan against me. Which then leads to going out to other people saying, so, you know, well, aren't you supposed to beat that? Aren't you supposed to, isn't that what the money's for? To David Jane's point. And then on top of it, the other story surrounding Simmons was his absence from OTAs and what it means about his character, which I don't think very much of. But you want to know how you avoid all this? This is just simple. And I'm sure Simmons has a PR firm, and I'm sure that they're just doing a bang-up job. But how difficult would it have been for Simmons when asked about the sacks? He knows he got 5 sacks last year. I know he got 5 sacks. You know he got 5 sacks. We all know he got 5 sacks. It's not as if it's some sort of secret. It's not like Tavondre Sweat's weight where it's hidden under lock and key and none of us can figure it out. I mean, there's about 18,000 websites that tell you that Simmons sacked a quarterback 5.5 times last year. So how difficult would it be for Simmons with the microphone in his face and say, well, I get double teamed all the time. Boo-hoo. How hard would it be for Simmons to say, hey, you know, I paid a lot of money on this team to go after and get the quarterback, and last year I didn't do it enough. And so this year I'm dedicated to doing it, and we're going to work together, and we're going to find a way because we know we have to get after the quarterback. How hard would that be? How hard? Stick a microphone in front of my face. Jeffrey Simmons, why aren't you getting more sacks? You're paid $23.5 million. Why are you not getting more sacks? You're right. I need to get more sacks. How hard? And at the same time, how hard would it have been for Simmons to just show up on one of the days of OTAs so that it's not a story. If Jeffrey Simmons shows up on the first day of OTAs and talks to the media about, this year we're all bought in, and this year Coach Callie and Denard and we've all worked so hard, and I, got to meet Cam for the first time, and he's so great, and if he does that and then doesn't show up the rest of OTAs, it's not a story. But again, Jeffrey Simmons is so unaware of really, it feels like how life works, but I guess of how the media works, that he just goes out there, makes complains and cries about double teams. And now we have to have all these discussions about, well, wait a minute. If you're getting double teamed every play, why isn't somebody else sacking the quarterback? And now every coach has to answer, and every teammate has to answer, and when you could have just said, hey, I'm paid a lot of money to sack the quarterback, and I didn't do it enough last year, and this year I've been focused. We as a group are focused on making sure that we collectively sack the quarterback more. You know what that's called? Accountability. The thing that Brian Callahan was trying to develop all offseason when Simmons wasn't here? That's what that's called. 615-737-1025 here on the program. 615-737-1025. One texter says the coach is right. They have to do other things to scheme Simmons to get one-on-one sacks. Basically like using a twist and different stunts to manipulate the front. All seasoned football coaches know that, but not your average fan. So then why did he keep the coordinator? If they didn't do any of that last year, if they just said, hey, Jeff, go beat the double team, and Jeff couldn't beat it because they didn't use twists and they didn't use games and they didn't use stunts and they didn't do everything that, again, seasoned football coaches, why did they keep the defensive coordinator? That's what I'm saying. Did they not meet last year? Now they're talking about we're going to have meetings. Did you not have meetings last year? Again, unless Harold Landry was the stupidest player on that defense, and I have a hard time believing that. All they did was get rid of their leading sacker and replace him with 4-sack Draymond Jones and college kid. 4.5 sacks. Boy, the text line is giving the business to Denard Wilson. Jared from Spring Hill says, more meetings and more corporate jargon trash. Callahan's meetings seem to have the same level of effectiveness as Michael Scott's. You know what this reminds me of back in the day with Floyd? Is whenever there was something like, oh yeah, you know what? We need to change this. Whenever somebody needs to make a big change, do you know what they do? Unless somebody is just a really strong leader that knows that their decision is going to anger some people and they'll just accept it and live with it. Do you know what everybody does whenever they're making a big change to an organization? They put together a committee. And Floyd used to every time go, the committee. Ha, ha, ha. We need another committee. We need a committee to figure that out. Ha, 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 ha. When I hear, you know what, we need more meetings. This year we're really going to sack the quarterback because we're going to have meetings. That's when I'm like, okay. Meetings. Meanwhile, the entire offseason, I was like, you need an edge rusher. You need a sacker. You need to sack the quarterback. If you remember, last year I complained extensively about right tackle, and I was proven right on that. But the other thing I complained about, again, extensively, was the fact that, well, quite frankly, they didn't replace Danico Autry's 11.5 sacks. And everybody told me that Tavondre Sweat, who never sacked a quarterback in college, that was going to be the replacement for Danico Autry. But the problem is they never replaced those sacks. Well, here we are today. Danico Autry has been a Texan for 2 years, and they still haven't replaced those 11.5 sacks. Again, you got to go get those sacks somewhere. Maybe it's Oladejo, but now you're replacing Danico's 11.5, and you're replacing Landry's average 10 sacks a year. So now you got to replace 21 sacks. Good luck. 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. More of your phones on all of this. And I got to tell you, the amount, and the gaslighting is not the right word, but this idea that it's more complicated than it needs to be is really a joke. Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 through the game.
somebody in his mold is never going to be Jeffrey Simmons in terms of his body type and his role. What is a reasonable next step for him to be more impactful in the pass rush?
Well, I think, he's mastering, his craft of what to do. His primary, secondary move, he has a better feel for what works well for him. So I think that as long as he keeps pressing himself and getting better and better at one or two moves, he'll get in better shape this offseason. That's one of the things we talked about, dedicating himself to transforming his body, becoming, lighter on his feet. Because when you watch him, he can do everything, from the standpoint of, being a big man, how big he is, he can do everything, but just getting in better shape, fine-tuning his craft, working on the moves that work well for him. And then ultimately he uses his power. So if he gets a one-on-one, he can power rush anybody there is, and collapsing the pocket will help the defense.
There you go. That was Denard Wilson on T'Vondre Sweat. I'll give him credit because he didn't come out and say it, but it kind of feels like he said it, where this time last year, the Titans were like, no, we think there's something there where we can develop T'Vondre Sweat into a pass rusher. And now they're like, yeah, he's never going to have the body type. Callahan made a similar comment where he was like, yeah, T'Vondre Sweat's really a first and second down player. But, we'll work him as a pass rushing and we'll see. And Denard's like, well, he's got his power so he can collapse the pocket and that'll be good for other people. T'Vondre Sweat had 1 sack last year. 1 sack. Again, I don't know where they're getting sacks from next year. They had 32 last season, or 34 last year. No, 32 last year. And Harold Landry led the way with 9, and they cut him. So I don't know where they're getting the sacks from other than they're going to have some more meetings. Joey from Bellevue says, does it mean listening to Denard Wilson talk about one-on-ones that T'Vondre Sweat can't win one-on-one? Well, Joey, you just heard. He can fine-tune his technique, and he can just push the guy backwards. A couple of years ago, the Titans played in the same season. This was 2022. They played the Vegas Raiders at the beginning of the year when the Titans were good, and they played the Dallas Cowboys at the end of the year when they were very bad. And in that stretch, there was a guy, I think his name was Jonathan Hankerton, something. And this guy was a big old fatty. I mean, he was fat. And so what the Raiders did when they played the Titans was they took this Jonathan Hankins and they just stuck him right over Aaron Brewer at 270 pounds. Jonathan Hankins was 6'3", 325. And so they just stuck him. He's been in the NFL since 2013. So he's got one job, and that is to be a big old fatty. He's got 18 and a half career sacks, and he's been in the NFL for 12 years. So he is a true nose tackle. Again, this is why you don't use the 38th pick on a nose tackle, because you can just go get Jonathan Hankins whenever you want. But so they stuck this big old Jonathan Hankins right over Aaron Brewer, and he just pushed him back and got to the quarterback. Then he was on Dallas later in the year, and I'll be damned if they didn't do the exact same thing. So that's what the Titans need to do with T'Vondre Sweat. Stop having fantasies about T'Vondre Sweat being a pass rusher and just say, hey, you go collapse the pocket, and then you look at the edge rushers and you say, hey, if he can't step up because the fat boy is going to push him back in there, and he's going to run into a guard if you do that. So he's going to try to run backwards out of the pocket, then you got to sack him. But then the question goes back to the edge rushers, and that is, can you actually sack them? One texter says, Jeffrey Simmons is like a Major League Baseball player who destroys fastballs and complains every time someone throws him a curveball. I would say the real difference is Jeffrey Simmons is more like a Major League player who was hitting third and fourth in the lineup, but he had some really good protection behind him. And he had guys that would get on base for him, which meant he was getting good pitches to hit. And then when Danico Autry left and Harold Landry slowed down and Arden Key stunk, all of a sudden you could just pitch around Jeffrey Simmons. I'll never forget, I read Chipper Jones' book, and Chipper was talking about when he got to the major leagues, he was the first overall pick, and he was the top prospect, and he gets called up to the major leagues, and Bobby Cox is hitting him third on the Atlanta Braves, who had won 2 pennants and 3 NL East titles, and he's hitting him in the middle of the order. And Chipper said he didn't totally understand it at first. Why would you take me, a 23-year-old rookie, and hit me third? And then he realized, wait a minute. If you have Marquise Grissom hitting ahead of me, the best leadoff man in baseball, he's going to be on base. And because he's a threat to run, they're going to throw me a fastball. And if you've got Fred McGriff and David Justice hitting behind me, bona fide all-stars, well, they're not going to want to have to pitch to those guys with a bunch of runners on base. So again, they're going to give me something to hit. That's what Jeffrey Simmons had in Danico Autry. I mean, again, I kept yelling and screaming, and I couldn't believe it when they let Danico Autry go. In fact, I asked Rand Carthon a question before the start of the 2023 season, and I said, are you thinking of extending any veteran players under contract now? Because the time that deals get done for guys that are headed into their last year is before training camp and before the start of the season. And you want to get a deal done because your only leverage with that player is, well, if you have a down year or if you get hurt, then you're not getting any money and you're going to have no market. So that's your leverage, but you're paying, again, this would have been in 2023, you're paying the 2023 price and not the 2024 price. And a lot of people thought that was about Derrick Henry. And I was actually really asking about Danico Autry. Because even though Danico Autry was old, I'm like, hey, you need Danico Autry. Because I always felt like Danico Autry and Bud Dupree when he was healthy and Harold Landry before the knee, I always felt like that was a great batting order. Where, again, okay, fine. You pitched, you want to double team Simmons? Well, here comes Danico, and he's going to get to the quarterback. Oh, you want to worry about Danico? Well, here comes Bud Dupree. And the Titans have gotten away from that. And until Oladipo, they really haven't drafted anybody to go in there and fit that mold of lineup protection for Simmons. Because Sweat's not that. He's a first, second down player. One texter says, you are completely right. Manipulating the front with stunts and twists is completely on the defensive coordinator. And if I was Callahan, I would have fired him last year after the season that they had, or at least put him on the hot seat. Well, I mean, Denard Wilson's going to be here as long as Callahan is. So if Callahan gets fired at the end of the year, so does Denard. But I believe, and the Titans believe differently. The Titans believed that Brian Callahan needs to be more involved in the defense. I believe Brian Callahan needs to be less involved in the defense. I believe Brian Callahan should have hired Lou Anarumo from Cincinnati when he got fired Denard Wilson, and said, Lou, here's the defense. Bones, here's the special teams. Instead, it's like, well, I thought I could give Denard the defense. I thought I could give Colt Anderson the special teams, and they sucked. So now I need to be more involved. And I think it's the opposite. I think it is you need to get rid of both of them and go get veteran, experienced guys that will not only know what to do and have called defenses and have run the meetings and have done all of that, but will also tell you what you need to know. Instead of this, oh, I can coach it. We just need a meeting. I can coach it. Instead of that, you need a guy that says like, hey, Brian, we don't have anything on the edge. Like, we need something. Cody says we've got 3 edge rushers. What are we doing? What do you mean 3 edge rushers? One texter into the text line says, I feel like the Titans have some really bad teachers or really bad coaches, guys that don't have a clue. I think the Titans have really inexperienced coaches that may not be cut out for the positions they're in. Some of it may be, a developmental thing where Jim Schwartz sucked at first, and then Jim Schwartz became Jim Schwartz. But when it comes to Denard Wilson, I kind of feel like Denard is just a lot of hot air. Like he's just a lot of sunshine and rainbows and lollipops. And his persona doesn't come off that way. But again, listen to him talk. We played those cuts yesterday from last year where he was like, hey, Arden, when we heat up, he'll start heating up. And Kaharski just replied back, well, isn't he going to be part of the like if you heat up, it's because of guys like him. Yeah. And all the kowtowing to Simmons. Somebody texted into the text line yesterday, and I didn't read it, but I've actually thought about it a lot over the last couple of days. It does kind of feel like the way that Callahan and Denard Wilson talk about Simmons. They talk about him like they work for him. Like he's their boss. It's really odd. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. TD at 4 o'clock. How was Cam Ward's day? We know there were some interceptions there, but how did it look? We will talk to TD about that. I actually do. You know what? I want to get into my Cam Ward interception take. So we'll do that next. 615-737-1025, Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 for the game.
would you say your confidence level is before this break heading into training camp?
10.
You ever at a 4 or a 5 or a 6, and when did you get to 10?
Nah, I'll probably never get that low, even if I, throw a 4-book game this year. At the end of the day, I'm a gunslinger. I live by that. I always die by it. So, Coach Callahan knows what type of guy he has in the quarterback room and me. And so, I'm just thankful that I got guys around me to help me out, along with B.A., Brandon, and Will. And Tim in there, they help me out a lot, just getting me right with the protections. Then also the receiving core, they're going to be able to, compliment my game a lot.
Cam Ward, a.k.a. Brett Favre. Hey, I'm a gunslinger. I'm going to throw that ball in there, and I'm going to show them, and let's just hope that Cam Ward allegedly I do say this. So apparently Cam Ward threw some interceptions today. I'm not going to pretend like I was there. TD will be with us at the top of the hour. TD was there. So we'll hear what TD says when it comes to how Ward looked today, throwing the football and the interceptions and everything else. Gentry did text me and said that Cam Ward had a couple of interceptions today in the red zone, and they were his first kind of screw around and find out months, that he would run out of ideas running around and then would turn around, just throw the ball on the other side, and there was a guy just standing right there to pick it off. Which sounds like rookie-ish stuff, but again, I didn't see it. But here's the one thing I'm going to say when it comes to the Cam Ward interceptions today, because I'm sure there will be a lot of people that say, hey, interceptions happen. He's just a rookie. It's just mini camp. And I'm not saying that's not true. But I also, 2 days ago, watched Cam Ward go 20 of 21, and I said, hey, look fine. Look good. Solid. Thumbs up. That one, by the way, he didn't complete was an interception. But I kept saying, okay, good, fine. Yep, thumbs up. Boom. I didn't get over my skis when it came to Cam Ward going 20 of 21 in practice. But boy, I saw some podcasts out there from people who weren't there. And it was, oh my God, did you see? In fact, I didn't do that. James, that wasn't my yell when someone loses their pants. It was, ah! Did you see Cam Ward? He was dealing today at minicamp. Let's go record a podcast about it. Did we see it? Nope, we didn't. But let's go record a podcast anyways. Ah! Again, I didn't do that. I saw that and I was disappointed, but I understand, like, content creation is content creation, and some people just say whatever because they'll get the clicks or whatever. And they want people to pay attention to them. And that's the way you do it, is just by pretending that something that you know nothing about, you know something of. And so these people that weren't there were talking about a day in which, again, PK said he looked solid. I said he looked fine. And they would, and I'm just going to say this. If you were like that 2 days ago and you were like 20 at 21, then you have to be absolutely, completely mortified by Cam Ward throwing interceptions today. Again, I'm not. Just like I wasn't losing my panties over Cam Ward throwing 20 at 21 2 days ago. But I wasn't there, so I'm not pretending like I'm going to tell you what it looked like or what it didn't look like. But I'm just saying, if we're going to be intellectually honest on this program, and we're going to claim intellectual honesty in real life, then don't you have to be completely depressed and mortified? Justin Graver, don't you have to do a podcast today about how Cam Ward threw interceptions? I mean, you didn't see him, but you did a podcast the other day reacting to 20 to 21. You didn't see that. I mean, that's like the young guys that PK called out the other day when he said, like, hey, why did I have to be the bad guy to ask Simmons the question when you guys are going to have your podcast and you guys are going to talk about Simmons and you guys are going to, and PK, and they said to PK, and again, I don't know the context of what was said because I wasn't there, but they apparently said to PK, yeah, we're just going to let you ask the hard questions because we don't want to be the ones that have to ask it. And I'm talking about those two guys that Paul called out. And they were like, yeah, Easton tweeted out yesterday, are they going to talk about me more on 1025 The Game? I'm like, dude, that's bad what you did. Basically admitting like, yeah, I don't want to get on people's bad side, so I'm not going to ask the hard questions. And again, if you didn't say that to Paul, if you didn't say it, then I apologize. But if you did say that, like, that's bad. Aren't we shooting for, again, intellectual honesty, integrity? Aren't we shooting for that? So again, I expect to see the podcasts coming out about how terrible Cam Ward was today, even from people that didn't see him. Even I have no idea if Cam Ward was terrible or not. I'm not pretending it. But if you pretended 2 days ago that Cam Ward was Superman, then you now have to do the same thing when apparently he reportedly didn't have as good of a day, even though nobody that wasn't there saw it. You think they'll do that?
Probably not.
Of course not. Of course not. One texter says content creators making podcasts about Cam Ward's good day in minicamp is the same thing as you doing 4 segments of radio about Aaron Rodgers building a home in Nashville. No, these are 2 totally different things. First of all, I had the facts about Aaron Rodgers and him building a home in Nashville and him telling people that he was going to be living by, that he was open to playing for Vrabel and the Titans. That was a fact. In fact, it was such a fact that it made its way to ESPN, where they had the panel sitting there talking about it, where Stephen A. Smith is opining on it. That's real information. Now, again, I didn't say Aaron was joining the Titans. I said Aaron had bought a house, and Aaron was telling people that he was open to playing for Vrabel. That is, in fact, what happened. That's new information. I had it. I reported it. This is taking information from somebody else, you not really knowing what happened because you didn't see it, and then you saying, that's the difference. LD from McMinnville says, are you jealous of the podcasters? I mean, I don't want to sound rude and conceited, but I'm not really jealous of the podcasters. I feel like everybody that has a podcast, unless you're Joe Rogan or Alex Cooper, I think most people that have podcasts would rather be on the radio. And especially when it comes to sports. And I'm going to tell you why. Because sports and news talk are the 2 things that, even though you can record and you can play back later, it's not the same as when it's live. Live callers, live reaction, live, and I firmly believe that on a Monday at 4:30, you want to get in the car and you don't want to download and log in on your phone. You just want to get in the car, click a button, and hear somebody tell you why the Titans screwed up. One texter says it was raw land, Jared. By the way, I'd like to know, did Aaron Rodgers ever actually go through with the move and actually move in to Williamson County? I mean, did he actually move? I mean, again, buying a house for Aaron is really not that big of a deal. You buy a house every day of the week. But did he actually move? Because apparently he actually got married. Okay, I was not at minicamp today. I have no idea what those Cam Ward interceptions looked like. TD was his reaction to Ward today and Ward over the 3 days. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game National Studios. We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee, 4 o'clock on a Thursday, which means it's time for the TD Power Hour, where Teron Davenport joins us from ESPN. TD, how are you?
I am doing great, man, especially after listening to that last segment. You did a great job. There was a lot of tea kettle calling itself black, but definitely on point. Good job with it.
For the people on what was that, Tuesday, where Cam went 20 of 21. I was gonna say, I was not there today. You were. I saw that Cam threw some interceptions. So I want to just say this. Give us the context today surrounding how Cam looked, and then let's go over the week as a whole.
Yeah, it's interesting. Both of those interceptions came. He was on the move, and he was going to the same side. So the first one, he was trying to get – so Calvin Ridley had one of those, what they call transcontinental. I love when Coach Mack refers to them as that, but it was a transcontinental crossing route, right? So we're talking about 10 yards, building your way to 15 to 17 as you go across the field, right? So he's going from left by the numbers over, and you kind of hook up right there before the numbers on the other side, on the right side. And so Cameron, he was scrambling to his right, and he was kind of looking back, and it was kind of like a backside where you try to squeeze it back in there, right? And he tried to squeeze it in there. Cody Barton, who, can we say this? I want to give him credit because he's a very savvy player, and I really like the way he's been able to read Cam Ward's eyes, and that led to 2 interceptions he had. But anyhow, he read his eyes, and he kind of took him to the football. And it was an easy, quick pick, and it was done with. Now, that was in 7-on-7. Low red zone, by the way. And so later on, they had another one, and I don't remember who the receiver was, but he was scrambling, again, Cameron Ward to his right, and he tried to fit it backside, like throw it, but it was more of a throw across the body. So it was an ill-advised throw. It's one of those ones where he comes to the sideline, and it's one of those, what are you doing? One of those type. He tried to squeeze it in there. He couldn't. And I got to look up the DB's name. Number 40. It's slipping my mind. Let me see if I could go to my notes real quick and look it up. But
Here, keep talking. I'll find number 44.
Yeah, the DB picked it off. And so that's how the 2 interceptions happened. They were both bad plays. Look, the first one, I don't think it was a bad play as much as it's like, okay, you learn that these guys are a lot smarter at this level, and you can't do that. So that's
Davion Ross,
right? Number 40. He had the interception, and it was one of those ones where like it was late in the play. I'm not even sure who it was intended to, but he threw it, like I said, back across his body, and these things happen. He said that after practice, he said that maybe he should have sidearmed it, and that might have allowed him to get the different torque on it that he needed to get it to the receiver. But nevertheless, those were the 2 interceptions.
If you were coaching Cam Ward today, because again, these are teachable moments, but if you were coaching Cam Ward, what would you say about those ill-advised throws? Because there was a lot of talk when he was coming out about the fact that even though he didn't turn the ball over at Miami, scouts thought that there were some plays that he made that were turnover worthy, as far as the NFL was concerned. And yet at the same time, part of this with Cam is that's kind of his ball player mentality is, okay, I threw that one pick, but I've got the talent to be able to go out there and make the special play. And oftentimes at Miami, he did. So if you were coaching Cam and you were watching the tape back of that throw, kind of what would you coach him? What would your advice be?
Yeah, and you know what? Let me flip it, actually. It was Ridley running the crosser on the Dalen Ross one. I went back and looked at my notes. It was Ridley running the crosser, right? On the first one that Cody Barton picked off, everything was covered, and Ward, he scrambled to his right and just kind of like was looking, and Barton saw him look backside to see if he could sneak one in, and that's how that happened. So I stand corrected on that. But the coaching points, honestly, on the first one where everything, like, first off, let me say this, the defense ruled today. if your name wasn't Bryce Oliver or Julius Chestnut, the defense ruled today. Bryce Oliver had 3 touchdowns. Chestnut had 2. But I'll say this. The Cody Barton, the first one, that's one of the ones where you say, okay, look, like everything's covered, just throw it away. And that's something that Cam Ward had did for the most part, right? Up to that point. He just got a little greedy and tried to, and these are the things, and I know you went off on, hey, he thinks he's Brett Favre because he said, if you're a gunslinger, like you don't wait until you're Brett Favre status to say you're a gunslinger. If you're a gunslinger from early. You know what I mean? And so these are the things.
Don't you gotta pop out a mom like that, Baker Mayfield style?
Well, yeah, like I'm not gonna get into all that. But the thing is, if you're like, these are the things, if you're a guy who is a gunslinger, like there's give and take where it's like, you know what, that's kind of like a part of the experience. You hate to have the interceptions, but that interception could also be 1 or 2 touchdowns. Like that's just like some of the big plays that the guy makes. Like these are the negative consequences. So it's one of the things where you tell him, like, look, man, like understand where to take your shots. We're in the red zone. We can't give up points. Live to see another play. At the very least, throw it away. Let's get a field goal. I'm not trying to coach that playmaker out of you, but you just got to play smart and know when to do it. That would be my conversation on the first one. The second one, hey, listen, these guys, you can't telegraph. Like you can't. I know that's the read that you want, but sometimes it's not going to be there. And again, if it's not there, throw it away or tuck it and run it. Like let's get positive yards, or at the very least, have the next down with the same opportunity to make something happen, as opposed to turning the football over.
How did you feel about Ward as the 3 days are concerned, all into one big bucket?
Good job. Actually, I'm not going to say he was outstanding because I refuse to say that about anybody in OTAs or minicamp. Just like I won't say anybody's terrible, but I think he did a solid job. One of the really big things for me was how he would be able to respond to the kitchen sink being thrown at him. And yesterday, I mean, I'm talking about double gap blitzes, interior gaps from the inside backers, and then getting them to show and then drop back into coverage. I'm talking about safety coming off the edge. I'm talking about corner blitzes. There were some of those little games that they were playing up front, and I do want to get into that in the coordinated pass rush at some point with you. But yeah, I think he did a good job of picking those things up, still making plays despite that happening. And there was one where he saw the blitz about to come, right? He checked out of it, and that was that deep throw to Calvin Ridley on the post. So that was a good thing. I think he's done a solid job of distributing the football. It's very clear that he and Restrepo, they have that chemistry, and he's gone to him probably more than others. But the timing on the deep outbreaking routes, 1 to Io Manor, you see he and Gunnar Helm connecting on seams. I think all that's good, but he just has to work a little bit better on getting adjusted to the speed. Like he said, that's the big thing that he's adjusting to, right? And so like on his deep passes, he knows that he's learning that you can't put as much air on it, right? He has to be more disciplined with his eyes. The interception to Cody Barton, he didn't look off. That happened yesterday. He didn't look off the linebacker, right? To kind of move him and create some space. He just kind of looked where he was throwing it. So those types of things he has to get better at.
TD, where do you feel like Cam is in his development? For example, going back to the gunslinger thing, when Patrick Mahomes was drafted, Andy Reid said, hey, I coach Brett Favre. So if I can coach Brett Favre, then I can coach a gunslinger, but he's not ready yet. And we know that Mahomes sat the bench, and we know that Borgonzi used that example as a learning experience for him about where, making sure that there's a plan for the young quarterback. When it comes to Cam, where do you feel like he is in his development and his readiness to be on the field now that you've seen him in live competition, albeit without pads or anything like that? But just where do you feel like Cam is in his development?
Yeah, I think he's in the very early stages of his development. And that's why you're seeing, the reps, he'll get a set and then Levis will come in and then he'll get another set and then the other guy, you know what I mean? They understand that. I think he still has to, he's in that, it's kind of like a date, right? Like, when you first go on a date with somebody, with somebody, and you're kind of like feeling that person out. Okay, like, what is this person like? Okay, what excites them? What, you know, all of those types of things. That's what he's doing. Okay, what is the defense like? How quickly do they react? How much difference is the speed of the defensive backs? How quicker are these guys able to get in and rush me as a passer? That's all. It's a feeling out stage right now that he's in, and I think come training camp is going to be that once again. And when the pads go on, obviously they can't hit him, but you're able to be a little bit more physical up front and do some things to impact the quarterback. And I think he's in that situation. He's kind of like that baby, like, you know, how some people, like, they have a young kid and they want to teach them to swim and they just throw him in the pool, right? Of course, they're not going to let the kid drown, but they throw the kid in the pool to see how they'll respond and just get that fear out of the way early. Now, in some cases, it causes a fear and you don't like water going forward. But I mean, their hope is that being able to put him in uncomfortable situations will help him learn and adjust to the things to come.
If you were, now that you've seen him, if you were building out a plan for training camp, what would he need to prove to you in training camp for you to feel comfortable that he is ready to be thrown out into the water, which would be, you know, a real NFL game where he can get popped on the road at Denver?
Yeah, well, to throw him into the true water, I think there's a lot to see. But right now, I think throwing him in the water, as far as like throwing the sink at him with all the different blitzes and stuff, that has to happen, and it has to continue. But to me, the main thing is just see him continue to be calm in those situations, not make the same mistake twice, right? So now we got to see, okay, the next time you are in a situation where you're trying to throw that curl route or that you know, that stick route, you got to be able to move that linebacker to his opposite side just a little bit, so that way he can't swoop in and pick it off the way Cody Barton did. So it's those things, right? We know that he could throw the football. Like, everybody knows that. He could sling it. That's a given. But the little things, okay, knowing when to take your shots, when to take your risk, and when to just, hey, look, man, just throw it away and live to see another day. Those are all the things that he has to learn to do more consistently in order for me to say, hey, you know what, put him out there on September, was it September 10th?
Yeah. How did the other quarterbacks look?
Look, Will Levis, and I went up to Will after practice and said, man, like, you look pretty good. Like, I like some of the throws you made. You know, a lot of people have complained about his ability to recognize the blitz. Well, you know what? He did that. He canned it, and he took a deep shot to Bryce Oliver. That was one of Bryce Oliver's 3 touchdowns today. And that's why I said, outside of Bryce Oliver and Julius Chestnut, the offense didn't do much. But I think Levis just has to continue to just maximize each rep he gets, right? And, you know, the customary Will Levis mistakes that we've seen, he can't afford to have those, right? If he wants to have any possibility to compete for the starting job. Now, we know he's not going to win it, but I think from Levis, what I've seen is a positive mindset. I've seen some really, really good throws that he's made, the willingness to go deep when need be, but he's also starting to check it down. Like, you're seeing that all of that happen. You know, he has that pocket panic, and I don't know, you know, what Jordan Palmer, that training could do to fix that, but you know, the guy just has a way of unraveling when that pressure gets to him, and he'll do something and be like, I know I shouldn't have done it, and have the exact reason why he shouldn't have done it and what he should have done after the moment, but in the moment, he does the wrong thing.
TD is with us. 615-737-1025. We'll hit your phones for TD at the end of the hour, as we always do, a mini camp edition. Sacks. It's been a big topic, and the Titans think they may have the answer to getting more of them this upcoming season. We'll get into that with TD next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game.
do you expect of him against double teams? Premier defensive tackles around the league.
Right. Well, look, is this when you get a double team, and if you know how to work, how the four guys work up front, it's 4 against 5. When you get the slide, all right, it's always either you work an edge or you work to split them. Because you got to understand this. Sometimes you have to split them, and the other guy gets the one-on-one. If you don't split them, now it's a hole where a quarterback can escape. So, like I said, Jeff's going to win, and he has been double teamed and won on double teams. But we have to do a better job up front, rushing together, being 4 against 5, all right, against their front, and then presenting certain packages to make it easier for him to win. Jeff's going to win against anybody. Jeff's is a dominant football player. Every team in the National Football League would love to have 98 lined up on it.
There you go. That was Denard Wilson yesterday. TD with us for the TD Power Hour. So TD, double teams and sacks have been a big topic of discussion the last couple of days. Simmons getting double teamed. And then, of course, are the Titans going to end up getting more sacks? It's a team effort, so on and so forth. I know you want to weigh in on this, so floor's yours.
Yeah, so it's not just double teams and it's not just sacks, so to speak. Like they need to, well, it is sacks. It's not just double teams. I'll put it that way. And you love that quote. You got to look at what he's saying, though, right? Because so what happens is you see, and it's not just Simmons getting double teamed, right? There's times Sweat gets double teamed also because he's just the fastest way from between two things is a direct line, right? So obviously the most concern, and this is why you see guards getting paid more and why you see interior defensive linemen getting paid more. The most concern is the pocket being collapsed up the middle, right? And so when they double team Sweat, who has a bull rush that is really good when he uses it, Simmons is getting single team, like one-on-one, and he's not beating that as much, right? And so when you say this whole thing about the double team saying, hey, Simmons is doing everything he has to, and whoever's getting the one-on-one isn't, no, it's overall. There are both guys getting one-on-one or double coverage, and they have to beat the one-on-ones. It's not just, the guys when Simmons is getting it. So you have that. But also, you had this question about, hey, where are they going to get the sacks? Like, how are they just doing meetings? And you talked about the stunts.
Meetings.
And you talked about the double teams. Well, here's the deal. There's a focus on a coordinated pass rush. Now, understand this. I'm not saying this is going to work. I'm just telling you their process. So please don't say, hey, I'm not defending anything. I'm just explaining what's going on. So I talked to Ben Bloom, right? And the first thing he told me when I said, okay, how can you guys get it to the point where you could win with 4, sometimes 5, but more with 4 like the Eagles did? How do you get to that point? And what he said is you got to win these rushes individually, but at the end of the day, the 4-man rush will have the most success with the guys that rush together, the coordinated pass rush. There are 6 rush lanes technically. Each tackle has a lane outside of them. There's a lane outside each guard. There's a lane on each side of the center. That's 6, and there are 4 rushers. So our ability to win our individual rushes, but at the same time rush together with being on the same page of who's where and what's my responsibility within the 4-man rush, whether it's a straight rush or a game, that's really how you have the most success. Rushing the passer and generating more sacks. So it's winning individually, the technique, and then rushing together, right? So give you a good example because this happens to the Titans all the time. And that's why I've asked multiple guys, Draymond Jones, Ben Bloom, Tracy Rocker, Denard Wilson. Hey, how can you guys get it to where these pressures that you're getting are turning into sacks? Because so many times when you watch and you look at the Drake May game where he rushed for like 90 something, right? A good 30 to 40 of that should have been negative yards. But guess what happened? They didn't finish the deal. They ran the arc too deep. Drake May was able to step up and as the pocket was getting collapsed, he was able to go to the space that was vacated by the edge rusher running too deep. And that left an open passing lane. So as an edge rusher, you got to know not to run the arc too deep and create a back door for the quarterback to slip out of. But that happened a lot last year. a lot of these quarterback scrambles. So that's why the focus is on a coordinated pass rush. That's the focus where everybody understands, okay, you know what? I can't run it too deep because I know Sweat is pushing the pocket, but at the same time, Sweat has to understand he got to push the pocket to flush that quarterback into the edge rusher that's rushing. But guess what? If he's not winning his one-on-one, he's flushing the quarterback to an empty space. So these are the things that has to happen. And again, I'm not saying that this is what I'm not saying they're going to all of a sudden become a high sack team. I'm just telling you exactly what they're explaining to me. And so when I talked to Jeffrey Simmons about that yesterday, he said the exact same thing. We got to be disciplined in our pass rush lanes and understand that we all have an individual job. And if we collectively do those jobs, i.e. coordinated pass rush, we'll be fine. But when we don't do the job, whether it's one of the guys on the interior getting washed away and allowing the quarterback to step up and sneak through and run that way, or if it's one of the guys on the edge running too deep, allowing the quarterback to backdoor out of the pocket. That's what I want you to understand. So, yeah, I know it sounds dumb and you hate hearing them say that meetings things like that. But if you don't have it, and it's almost like it's almost like you're purposely avoiding the point. I mean, you got to have meetings in order to get something in order. But you also you made a good point about Danico Autry, and I was on the same page with you about they cannot let Danico Autry go. But let me tell you this. They made offers to him. Danico Autry wanted to go to the Texans. He wanted to go to Houston. So, I mean, yeah, technically they let him go, but he left also. You got to look at it that way too. And when you have, and this is why I think Draymond Jones is a guy that I'm not saying he's going to get 10, 11 sacks, but I think this is why they went after him. Because you look, and you talked about it earlier when you were going through the batting lineup and you made the Chipper Jones. Now, Kenny Lofton was a better leadoff hitter than Marquise Grissom. But we're not going to get into all that. But you made the example of the lineup itself, and you're right? Because when Danico Autry was there, a lot of times if you look, he was the shoot man. He would shoot inside and Simmons would loop out and then around to go get the sack, right? Danico Autry, I'm not going to say he made Jeffrey Simmons, but he helped Jeffrey Simmons a lot because of his pass rushing prowess and their ability to just, because they had the liberty to where they wanted to run a game or a twist, they had the liberty to do it, even if it wasn't called. But here's the kicker, though. The two of them were on the same page to the point where they could just look at each other and they knew, okay, you shoot, I'm a loop, or vice versa. Not having Danico Autry is definitely a bad thing for Jeffrey Simmons. But guess what? When you're looked upon, and people say, hey, you're a top 10 D tackle, you got to overcome it, right? And so the double teams, when they come his way, as Denard Wilson said in the quote that you love, you got to split them, right? Because the least you could do, you split it, the double team. If you split that, you're not giving the quarterback a lane to rush through. So he can't step up in the pocket as much. I'm not saying if you collapse the pocket and go get him, hey, that's doing your job to the fullest. But the least you could do is split it. So that way when that quarterback tries to step up, he doesn't have room to step up. And that will allow the edge defender to get him.
I don't disagree that the coordinated pass rush has to happen and rush lane integrity is important. I just don't think that they have, in this case, I don't think it's an X's and O's issue as much as I think it is they just don't have the players to get the sacks.
Oh, no. And look, having the players to get the sacks is very important. And honestly, that's, again, why losing Danico Autry is a big problem. But you know what? If you don't have that guy that's just if you don't have – you know what? Zadarius Smith is out. I have no clue why they haven't grabbed him. I think that's something that should have absolutely happened, and them not doing it, I think, is a mistake. But you're right. You need the players in order to players are going to supersede scheme. You know what I mean? And right now they don't have the collection of players to do that.
This is just an opinion. I wonder if the front office is operating under a different timeline than the coaching staff, where the coaching staff is operating under we need to win now. to save our jobs, and the front office is operating under it's a rebuilding year and we're going to have to take our lumps, but we don't want to spend the money on Zadarius Smith because we want to save that money so we can spend it next year.
I don't know. Next year on who? Right? And last time I checked, like this was it's a draft, develop, retain organization, right?
Sure.
That is going to be not liberal, but like selective in the free agent process. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
By the way, I just want to say in the 1995 World Series, Marquise Grissom hit 360. Kenny Lofton hit 200.
Yeah, they were older. I think Kenny Lofton's better. I always liked Grissom though, even when he was a Expo. That's when I liked him. He and Delino DeShields.
So, but it should be noted that when the Indians went back to the World Series in 97, Marquise Grissom was on that team. He was the starting center fielder, and Lofton was in Atlanta.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Crazy. I loved Grissom. And Grissom with the Expos, like the Braves got him towards the very end of his prime, but Grissom with the Expos was
with Larry
tenacious.
Walker too, and yeah,
Will Cordero was on that team. I mean, they were freaking stacked.
Mm-hmm.
And
Andres
nobody
the
knew
Big
it.
Cat, Andres Galarraga.
Galarraga was on that team.
Yeah.
I mean, they were freaking stacked back in the day. Okay, more with TD, and we talked about Cam Ward. We talked about the pass rush. What about just the just an overall feel for how guys are doing, whose stock is up, whose stock's down? We'll get into that with TD. We'll do that next year. TD Power Hour, and of course, we'll hit your phones at the end of the hour. 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 for the game. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Those are my guys. They take great care of my home, and they can do the exact same for you. Have you ever called a plumber, electrician, or HVAC tech and felt like they were trying to sell you something that, quite frankly, you really didn't need? If a deal sounds too good to be true, like a $99 club membership or a $29 tune-up, that's because it is. The reality is they have to find something to fix so they can cover their costs for the discounted club memberships. And unlike the other guys, Hiller never, ever, ever, ever offers deals designed to trick you or sell you something that you do not need. Period. You hear me talking about my friends at Hiller all the time and why they take great care of me, but they will do the exact same for you. This is why I trust them. So schedule online like I do at happyhiller.com. And as they always say, you know, happy you'll be or the service is free. So that's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller, call the Happy Face Truck today. There you go. That was Brian Callahan earlier this week. So, TD, I'm going to ask you this question. Do you sense this year, now that the offseason program is behind us, mini camp is behind us, and it's really training camp the start of the season, do you sense any difference from Brian Callahan from last year to this year?
He seems to be a little bit more, I don't want to say confident, but convicted in his approach, I guess you could say. The way that they went and they did a lot of self-scouting and self-evaluation, and given how bad it was last year, like that had to have been a lot. But I think he's very confident in what they've put together as far as the program that focuses on minimizing the different things that just murdered them last year. Self-inflicted negatives, mental errors, like it ties hand in hand.
Do you think Callahan, he talked about having more urgency with the coaching staff. Do you think this season, when they really get into training camp and spots have to get determined, do you think we'll see a meaner Callahan than we saw last year?
I don't know, because from what I understand, behind closed doors, like he has the jerk in him, so maybe we'll see it on the surface a little bit more, like on the practice field. I don't know. That's a tough call for me to say.
Okay, who's stock, through the mini camp and offseason program, who has impressed you on the team, that you looked at and you said, hey, man, this guy, he looked pretty good. I'm keeping an eye on him in training camp.
Cody Barton, very much so, just because, like I said earlier, his intelligence, like, and his awareness, I guess you could say, and even further, I don't know if you saw the mic'd up where he was going over things with David Bender. But like this dude he's a coach on the field and then even off the field. And I was watching him today. He was talking to James Williams, actually. And I was watching him, and like when they got off the field and you see him just like, you see him making gestures and directing them. And then it was pretty interesting. Another time they were doing it was like half field. They had to ball the negative 45 at their own 45. The offense did. And he was not in the game, but I saw the linebackers just kind of like come up and they were standing over those interior gaps, and you hear them like, hey, make sure you get your depth. Make sure you get your depth. And here it was, they were showing blitz, but they dropped, right? And they dropped into the passing lane that the quarterback wanted to go to. So things like that, I think are pretty cool to watch. Cody Barton, I think is a pretty under the radar signing that I think may have some good dividends for him.
Now, on the other side of it, who were you maybe wanting to see a little bit more from or want to see more from when camp starts?
That's a good question. Want to see more. I mean, you could easily say any of the offensive linemen, but because that all is different, once the pads come on. Who would I want to see a little bit?
Unless you're Dillard. That's bad with the pads off.
Yeah, I had a coach. He used to joke with guys like Dillard, and he said, "Somebody better go see the wizard and get some heart."
Yep.
That's what he used to say. Dang, somebody I would want to see more out of. I mean, it's honestly units. Like I want to see more out of the D line. I want to see more out of the linebackers. I want to see more out of the offensive line. So I'll do it that way.
Where are you on the receivers? Because we know that there are a lot of different guys and they do a lot of different things. You said Bryce Oliver had 3 touchdowns today. I've been a big believer that, again, when it comes to the Restrepo thing, I just don't see him making the team over Bryce Oliver because Bryce Oliver, probably plays a little bit more special teams. And, I think, again, I know it's just camp and it was camp last year. I think Bryce Oliver's pretty good. And so I do wonder, now that we've seen Io Manor and DK and Van Jefferson, and how do you kind of see the receiver room right now?
Yeah, Oliver had a good day today. I think you're going to start to see them dropped into boxes, right, where it'll be split, right? And I think when you look at Io Manor you're going to see him continue to make a move for that X position. When I look at the receivers, there's a lot of question, right? Okay, well, what do you do with Van Jefferson? He looks good, right? So, okay, well, how are you going to move him around? How are you going to move Calvin Ridley around? Like, what boxes are these guys going to fall into? And I know you want the cross training and have multiple positions, but you also want to be able to have them specialize in something too. So it's a tough call. Tyler Lockett. There you go. You say someone I want to see more from. Tyler Lockett. We didn't get to see him involved in 7-on-7 or team periods. So that would be one rather than the groups. I just want to see how it falls into place for them because they have a long list of guys, and even like James Prochet had a pretty good day yesterday. So it's like, okay, who's going to become the one that consistently make plays and the one that you're like, hey, they can't afford to not have him on the roster.
How do you feel about Restrepo's chances? You talked about he and Cam are always kind of dialed up together, and yet it's a very crowded room. How do you feel about his chances?
Yeah, I think he has a chance like all of the other guys, but the odds are stacked against him. What are you going to do with him on special teams, right? Are you going to have him as a gunner? Are they have him as a punt returner, but he's a guy that I would trust to secure the catch, but he's not someone I think is going to get you much as far as like the actual return. So where else can he provide value to have him on the roster? But here's the problem that I think they're going to face. I don't know that they could push him to the practice squad because now you're sitting at okay, well, yeah. Whereas I think a Bryce Oliver is someone that you could push to the practice squad. So it's like a tough call. And that's not to say that those guys are competing against each other because I don't think they are. When you look at it from a micro perspective, macro, yeah, they're all receivers. But when you look at it from a micro, it's like, okay, well, who's going to be the best slot options for this team? Who's going to be the best X options? I don't know.
And the other thing, too, you brought up the punt return thing. Like, let's say that slot, that backup slot punt returner position comes down to Mason Kinsey and Xavier Restrepo. Who's to say that Restrepo's a better punt returner than Kinsey? Because Kinsey is a solid punt returner, even if Restrepo's a better receiver, but you're not going to use him ahead of Tyler Lockett in the slot, then I would almost think, okay, well, if Kinsey ends up being the better punt returner, you probably take Kinsey as opposed to Restrepo.
Well, I think that's why you look at Chimere DK and he's the wrench in both of their game, Mason Kinsey and Xavier Restrepo, because he is that guy that could play the slot. And guess what? You could run those deep over routes and vertical stuff because he is a fast receiver. So you could use him in that perspective. But at the same time, Kinsey and Restrepo are better like in the phone booth type, like across the middle and that 10 to 15 yard range. But DK is probably going to be a better option in the return game. So to me, having Chimere DK on the roster, that hurts both of those guys more than most other receiving options.
All right, your phones for TD are next. Hit them up right now, 615-737-1025, the mini camp edition of the TD Power Hour, Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, TD Power Hour, Teron Davenport with us, the mini camp edition. TD, do you have a thought or do you want to go right to the people?
No, we can go to the people. I wish Wretched, Scrivener, or whoever it is, I wish they would call in, but they probably won't because they're hiding behind some random name. But anyhow.
From the YouTube chat?
Yeah. He always.
Oh.
Yeah. I'll just stop it.
Dylan is going to kick us off here on the TD Power Hour phone line driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Dylan, go ahead.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, TD. You're the best. So you made a comment, it may have been last week or earlier this week, about how someone had asked about Gunnar Helm, and you said that you hadn't really noticed him.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was kind of an interesting comment. I know he was big in Texas and all that, but has that changed? And when you say that, do you mean he hasn't really been making plays or hasn't been standing out in a certain way? So if you could just talk a little bit about that, please. Don't hang up and listen. Thank you.
Yeah, Dylan, I appreciate it. I'm definitely not the best, but hey, that's the goal. But I'm glad you mentioned that because Gunnar Helm has actually had a solid week. He had one of those catches. He caught a seam route from Cam Ward, and it was just over the linebacker's shoulder. Great concentration on it, and he caught that one. He caught a corner route. I believe it was from Levis. He's actually started to show up, and I think it's just one of those things. Like as you get into yourself, like more comfortable and confident as you go along, I think you perform better, and that's what you're starting to see. It's going to be fun watching that tight end group. I know it's one that a lot of people feel is like bottom of the basement, but I think you could have a good collection of guys. So Gunnar Helm, yes, he started to show up. I even like, there's some times actually, yeah, they had him isolated backside, and they hit him on a backside route, and he was able to make the catch there. So it's going to be cool seeing how they use him and how they position him and what they do. He's definitely a guy I think that can have an impact.
I think tight end room stinks. Gino says
it's not good. It's not good. Not at all.
Gino says, overall, TD, how do the running backs look? And specifically Khalil Mullings.
Khalil Mullings, yeah.
Any rotation in short yardage or red zone work. He is a hard worker, a hard-nosed runner, and I believe that his agility was underrated at Michigan.
Yeah, I think he's someone that will start to get more work. Julius Chestnut actually had a pretty good day in red zone. He had a one-hander where he kind of warded off the linebacker and caught it with one hand, and then he caught a dump off like on like a pick play as well for touchdown. So he's been kind of like that guy in addition to Pollard and Spears. But I think overall, and I also say Mullen, he didn't practice much initially, but we got to see him involved in practice more today. So overall, I mean, it's another one of those things where it's like, okay, you guys see the pads on to really see like how everything is going to be. But I think they have a good group, and it's more or less going to be between Mullins and Chestnut to who settles down into that third running back role. But the thing you got to remember is Mullins, a former linebacker, so you get that versatility, right, on special teams. And we know when you're talking about the third running back, you got to look at other ways that they can contribute.
One texter, Jonathan, says, TD, do you think Jeffrey Simmons has lost the fan base?
I think it's more split. It's more split. Look, there's nothing wrong with having expectations, right? Let's be honest, like he hasn't performed to the level that you would expect from him, right? He needs to get more sacks, which, by the way, he's even admitted himself that he needs to get more sacks. I think he needs to use better, like he needs to see things off the field from a more optical perspective, as far as like, okay, you know what? OTAs, I need to be there because optically I know this isn't good. Okay, yeah, I could get into minicamp and pick up where we left off and hit the ground running, but optically it doesn't look good, right? He needs to have that better understanding. I think, and it's a shame because it's kind of like a gift and a curse, right? Because you ask him, hey, what is going on? Why aren't you getting enough sacks? Okay, well, you know what? I'm being double teamed, and when I take on the double team, I need the other guy to win, but also I got to win my one-on-ones when it slides to Sweat, which he has said multiple times. So I think, he just has to, bottom line, I put it this way, bottom line, He's got to play better and be more impactful.
That's like my buddy that played in the big league said that all they used to talk about in the minor leagues was if you don't like something, play better. So you don't like the food they're feeding you in single A and you want to go to triple A where they got better food, play better.
Yeah.
You know, you want to fly charter flights and you want to stay in nice hotels and you want to make a bunch of money, go play better. They'll put you in the big leagues. And that is, I guess, to a certain extent, kind of the deal around here. One texter says, hey, TD, how's the secondary looking? Any young guys that can emerge similarly to Jarvis Brownlee?
And Marcus Harris is sticky, man. I like him. He's a shorter corner, but he is always in the receiver's pocket. Jamari Harris had a nice pass breakup today. He's the guy, that undrafted free agent from Iowa, who they paid, pretty well. So he has a good shot. Outside of that, DB wise or corner wise, I haven't really, you're not seeing Darrell Baker isn't out there. By the way, I saw Snead today. Not in uniform, but I saw him, in street clothes. He and his son were standing on the patio as we were waiting for Cam Ward to speak, and he went back inside. So I did see Snead, but I mean, look, there's still a lot to be desired from Jarvis Brownlee Jr. He's working on not being as grabby. He did get beat by Alec Iomanner, and he grabbed him. Iomanner.
Oh, that was such. I mean, yeah. I did like the whole throw the flag. When I saw
and
that.
he ran through the contact, right, and still made the catch. To his credit. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot that has to happen. I think as you said earlier when you were like, yo, there's a lot of who when you're looking in the secondary, because I've caught myself looking at the roster a few times. I've kind of learned who's who a little bit more now, but even like earlier, I'm like number 40, he had the interception. Who the heck was it? You know what I mean?
Speaking of Snead, when do you think we'll see him in Titan clothes and not street clothes?
Man, listen, that one right there is like, that's a lost cause. I don't know when. I have no clue when we'll see him. And, it's unfortunate because like you got, at least sometimes you can say, okay, well, you know what? The guy's hurt, but we know off the field there's nothing going on. Or you can say, okay, the guy has something he's working through off the field, but once he works through that, we know he'll be here. You can't say that as a coach. You can't say that about, like, it's double jeopardy kind of speak. So I don't know when to tell you that he will be back. I wanted to ask about that today, but I just said I'll just leave it alone and we'll see what happens training camp and kind of take it from there.
I was talking to somebody who I'll just say their opinion probably matters a little bit more than yours and I's when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you know what? You guys should just release Snead if this commissioner suspends him and void the guaranteed money. And I was trying to see if there was going to be like a direction one way or another, and there wasn't. Like I was going to see if there was going to be like, oh, we couldn't do that, Jared, or oh, we couldn't this, or we couldn't whatever. And again, I'm just saying this guy's opinion matters just a little bit more than ours, but I definitely think if the commissioner suspends him, they need to get out of that contract, not because of the off the field stuff, but it's almost like using the off the field stuff as an excuse to get out of the money that's due to him.
Yeah, to backdoor it. No, I mean, in a perfect world, they'll be able to like get out of that and get a Jair Alexander. You know what I mean? But
Jalen.
Yeah, that one is an interesting one to me. Just like Alexander, there's drawbacks, Alexander with the health, but yeah, I'm so let's say it this way: get a veteran impact corner,
sure,
right? At what you would imagine would be a bit of a lesser price.
I would just say this on the Alexander Ramsey front. I think they're both a little crazy in their own right.
Yes,
but I have more faith in Jalen to show up on a Sunday and play than I do in Alexander.
Yeah, Alex, he's had some injury
the Packers
issues.
Was weird.
Yeah, he's had some, like, look, I don't agree with you on the Jalen over Alexander, but I understand where you're coming from because there's definitely been some injury issues and stuff like that.
Rob is up next here. Rob, thank you for calling. You're on with TD. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank y'all. Hey, TD, I wanted to ask you a question about the offensive line. Pretty straightforward.
Sure.
Do you think we'll be good, decent, or only serviceable this year?
I think decent, Rob, is the better way to look at it. Dan Moore, like it really is all it's on Dan Moore Jr.'s it's on his shoulders. You know, that one sack that Simmons had yesterday, he ran by Dan Moore like Dan Moore wasn't on the field, which by the way, he left early yesterday and wasn't on the field today. But yeah, I'll go with decent. I there's nothing you could tell me right now to make me say more than decent. And again, we haven't seen him in pads. We'll see, especially those joint practices. That's going to be a good opportunity to get a better gauge.
TD, good to see you as always. And I know you're going to probably at some point take a little time off here now that we are done until training camp. So always good to have you on the Power Hour.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. You take care. Appreciate everybody tuning in.
TD, great better against Georgia Tech or he played better against Syracuse, he would have been in the college football playoff. So I'm 10 out of 10. I'm always going to be confident. I'm always going to be a gunslinger. I'm always going to be a sure. Again, I'm sure you guys can say, hey, he's confident, Jared. What do you expect him to say? What is he going to say? He's not confident? Again, Cam Ward doesn't have to say 10 out of 10. That is the biggest load of bullcrap I've ever heard. That would be like asking me what my GPA was in college. And by the way, I have no idea what my GPA was, but if you were to ask me, what was your GPA at Louisville? And I said, 4.0, you'd say that's bullcrap. When Cam says 10 out of 10, that's ridiculous. And if you think, oh no, Jared, you don't understand. Cam's confident. You're not confident like Cam is. Cam's in it. This is Bill Belichick from his audiobook on confidence. And again, I would think Bill kind of knows a thing or two. Here's what Bill said about confidence and developing it.
Confidence is an epiphenomenon. It doesn't exist in a vacuum or independently of everything else. It's relational. And yet these days, confidence has become a product people think they can pick up off a shelf. I've heard it all over the years. Confidence at work, confidence in dating, confidence in everything. Come on down and pick up your confidence. No strings attached. Here's the truth. You cannot buy confidence. You cannot learn it. You cannot teach it. And you sure as hell won't get it from reading or listening to this chapter or this book. As far as I'm concerned, confidence isn't even something to strive for. It's something that you exhibit when you strive for something in the right way. But that's not very selling, so my publisher would probably prefer me to put it this way. I can't force you to be confident, but I can help you understand where it comes from.
Ding, 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 ding. You can't just say, oh, I'm confident. He's confident. No, you can look at it and you can say, hey, man, I mean, I've been playing football my whole life, and I'm just going to keep going out there and playing football. Because, again, you want to know how you become confident? You become confident by doing. And Cam Ward hasn't done anything. So I understand, hey, man, I'm excited to get out there in the NFL and to see how well I can play. And I'm excited to go out and try to help my team win the game. And I think I can do this because, I really grew in college and I've played against some of these guys out there. Again, optimism, hope, that's fine. You can be hopeful. You can be positive. I would prefer in his position to be positive, but you can't be confident. You cannot be confident in something you've never done. And let's use today's practice as an example. Because once again, when it comes to confidence and it comes to Cam Ward's confidence, Cam Ward threw 3 interceptions today at practice, right? Again, I'm not making a big deal out of it because, like I said, Lamar Jackson's performance in that Indianapolis preseason game, some of the worst football I've ever seen, and he turned out just fine. But at the same time, you threw 3 interceptions today. Now, let's say that this is a real game where you think, hey, I'm going to roll out to the right, and here comes the rush, and because this worked in college in the ACC, I'm going to throw off the back foot, I throw across my body, and there's a linebacker just like Cody Barton was there today who picks it off and intercepts it. And let's say that happens 2 more times. You mean to tell me your confidence is going to be 10 out of 10 the next day? That is not possible. It's just not possible. So again, like I understand Cam Ward, he's got this persona, I guess he wants people to believe in. And Chad Brinker said before the draft that he's confident, he's not cocky. I'm sorry. When you sit there and you tell me that you are a 10 out of 10 on your confidence, that is arrogant. That to me is ridiculous. And I've had players that have been in the Hall of Fame that have told me this game will humble you. You may think you're the bee's knees. This game will humble you. Let's ask Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston was one of the most decorated college players you could be. He won the Heisman Trophy. He won the national championship as a starting quarterback in college, Jameis Winston lost one game. Unlike Cam Ward, Jameis Winston actually is big and tall, like you would want a number one pick in the draft to be at quarterback. Jameis Winston was awesome in college. I watched Jameis Winston engineer a second half comeback against Louisville. I stood on the sidelines and watched the whole thing. I thought Jameis Winston was going to the NFL and was going to be a superstar. Now, do you think Jameis Winston would tell you, hey, I'm a 10 out of 10 confidence? Well, Jameis might say a lot of things, but do you think Jameis Winston is really 10 out of 10 when it comes to confidence? After the interceptions he threw in Tampa Bay, after the fact that when he was a free agent, nobody wanted him to start, to the benching that he ended up with, in Cleveland, and he's turned into a career backup. Even right now, he has no chance of being the starting quarterback for the New York Giants. None. Because Russell Wilson is the starter and Jackson Dart is the eventual starter. And Jameis Winston had accomplished a lot more up until this point than Cam Ward had. I'm just saying, again, do I think that this makes it that big of a deal? Like, oh, because Cam Ward said something that is, again, incredibly dishonest. It's just not even possible for this to be true. But again, I'm sure people, this is going to be great. Cam, he's so confident. Oh, yeah. Like, do you think that because of that all of a sudden Cam Ward is going to go out there, throw 3 picks and be totally fine? Because again, that doesn't make sense. Belichick's right in his book. When Belichick says, I can tell you where it comes from. You want to know where confidence is going to come from with Cam Ward? It's going to come from learning from his mistakes, getting better, going out there on the practice field and having success. And then taking that from the practice field into the joint practices. And then from the joint practices to the preseason games. And then to the games. That's where you get confidence. Again, 10 out of 10. Are you ever a 4, a 5, or a 6? No. I think it's well documented by everybody else on the station that I think I'm pretty good. I will tell you, there are some days, there are some months, there are some quarters where I think I'm better and some where I think I'm worse. And again, I've been doing this a lot longer than Cam. And that's coming from someone who, once again, knows that everybody thinks that I think I'm just so great. But I would never tell you that my confidence as a radio host is a 10 out of 10 or that it never fluctuates. That's just not possible. It is not possible. And so when I hear stuff like that, I get so ticked off because it's so fake. It's so phony. Cam Ward, don't be phony. 615-737-1025 is the phone number, 615-737-1025. We'll get to your phones next. I'm going to come to you, 1025, 106 the game.
What are you hoping to see out of Cam out of this final day, and kind of how would you evaluate his performance as a whole in this short week?
Progressed. He's gotten better every time he stepped out. Every situation, a lot of things are new, and every time he did it again or had an opportunity to see the rep again, did a nice job of taking the coaching points and improving on the next time out. And today will be his third time down here in the red zone. That's important. That's another critical area we need to improve in. And that timing everything happens faster. The windows are much more condensed, and it's always good. It's just you can't get enough work down in the red zone. So that's another nice way to cap off the camp for us is to work down there in the short part of the field and see if he's improved from the last time. So excited about that.
There you go. That was Brian Callahan today. Apparently it was not a great day for Cam Ward, but that's okay. He's still a 10 out of 10 in terms of his own confidence. I did promise phones, so we'll get to some of that. I do want to play this because, again, when Cam Ward says something like, oh, I'm a 10 out of 10 confidence, there's this, yeah, that I just know Titans fans say, like, that's our guy. He's so confident. He's going to be the best. He's this, he's that. When he says, hey, I'm a gunslinger. Uh-huh. When he says that, I'm like, okay, Brett Favre. Like, easy. Like, let's learn how to play in the NFL first. And then we can start saying stuff like that. Let's not say this stuff. It takes me back to something I want to play. This was last year. This was August of last year, Bussin' with the Boys. So Will Levis went on Bussin' with the Boys, and this is the producer from Bussin' with the Boys. And I want you to hear this because this is going to sound so sad in retrospect given the season that Levis had. But again, this is the way that the fan base gets when they've made up their mind that they want something to be true, even though if there's no evidence, if it is true or not. This, again, last August, this is Bussin' with the Boys, and Will Levis is talking to the producer.
Jack, you didn't mess with Will Levis at first, right?
Don't do this. Don't do this.
You got the photo of him jumping over to Tennessee, and it was kind of making me think. I was like, wait a minute.
No,
Jack was kind of, before the draft happened.
Will, I'm Jack. Nice to meet you.
Tell him what happened.
Lifelong Titans fan. All right, so when you were not selected in the first round, I put out a tweet, and it was like, when you don't select Will in the first round, it's some like dumb dancing gif. And it was nothing against you. It was purely for the value play. The second round when we got you, I was
before
like,
that week though
awesome.
on Bussin', you're like, I hope we don't get.
Well, I'm a Tennessee guy. I'm a Tennessee fan. So, previous season it was fun to go back and forth. So you have a rival quarterback coming into Tennessee, and you want to have as much fun with it as possible. But when you got selected in the second round, and then when you had your first breakout game with the Titans, when you and D-Hop had those, like, Matt, what was it, 3 TDs, something like that, I did my due diligence, and in the parking lot afterwards, I said, I was wrong. And I said, I'm fully on the Levis train, and I want him to be as successful as he can, whether it's with the Titans or somebody else. So I'm fucking stoked. I've been singing your praises around town. I know you're going to be a dog out there. So, but it takes a man to admit when he was wrong.
I mean, it's just pure on knees, just, oh, yes. And it's like, guys, we don't have to be that pathetic. It's okay. Like, I remember walking around my neighborhood listening to that. Because, again, when the quarterback goes on, does a podcast, this is the starting quarterback. If Levis were to go on Bussin' with the Boys now, I would not be listening to it. The quarterback goes on and does a podcast. It's part of the job. Got to listen to hear what he says. And I'm listening to this, and I'm like, this is so sad. This guy's never played. We have no idea if this guy's any good. We have no idea. And instead it was, I thought you were a terrible pick, but now I'm like, man, I was so wrong. You're going to be a dog on the field. You're going to be awesome. It's like, let's let these people earn it first. Let's let them earn it. It's okay. Go earn it. Instead, it's, Cam, how confident are you? I'm a 10 out of 10. Not just calling out how dishonest that is. It's unbelievable. Casey in Gallatin's all mad and says, Jared, this is such a petty thing to gripe about. I know you didn't ask him the question, but what does the media expect him to say when I ask that kind of stupid question? No player is going to say something like, well, I'm about a 4 right now. Do you want to see confidence in your quarterback, especially the number 1 pick overall? And you're going to sit here and complain about it? Get a grip on life, dude. Has anybody seen what Joe Flacco has been saying at Browns minicamp? with the press availabilities he's done. Now, granted, Joe Flacco has a little bit more experience with doing all of this than Cam Ward does. But Joe Flacco, I even texted Derek about this because, Derek was a veteran when Joe Flacco was a rookie in Baltimore, and they've remained friends. And I'm like, this guy, he gets it. They asked Joe Flacco a question about being a mentor. And Joe Flacco was like, yeah, I don't really like questions like that because it kind of feels like either way, there's going to be a reaction to this that's negative. If I say hey, I'm not really here to be a mentor. I'm here to play quarterback, and my job is to be the quarterback. People are going to run with that and say, Joe doesn't want to be a mentor. And that's not true. It's going to make me look selfish. And if I say something like, yeah, I'm really excited to mentor these young guys, people are going to say, shouldn't you be worried about the next game? So there's really no good answer to this. And so the way I would put it, and this is Joe Flacco, he goes, the way I would put it is, I have a lot of experience. Maybe there are things that I have learned in the way that I conduct myself that if a young quarterback were to see, maybe they would interpret that and say, okay, maybe I should do that for me or not. But that's how I hate these kind of questions. And he was asked about social media yesterday, and he had this great answer about TikTok and Twitter and everything else. And I'm like, man, Joe Flacco, he gets it. So when you say, hey, what do you expect Cam Ward to say? I never sit there and say, hey, don't ask Johnny the question, because what do you expect Johnny to say? Johnny's a grown man. Cam Ward's a grown man. He can say whatever he wants to say. What I would say in that instance, David Janes asked me the question. I haven't even prepared for what I'm supposed to say, but David Janes, go ahead, ask me the question, and I'll give you what I think is an appropriate answer.
How do you feel about being a leader?
Well, I feel like when it comes to being a leader, I just worry about making sure that I'm going out there and doing what I'm supposed to do. And if that means that other people can see that and say, okay, I want to be like that, then that's great. And if that means that at times, if other people aren't doing what they're supposed to do, that's going to help us be successful, then we've got to get to a point to where everybody is trying to do what it takes to be successful. And I don't think that there's one person or one coach or one player that's going to define whether or not we do that well for our team. Is that hard? Was that controversial? Don't think so. How confident are you? Well, look, I've been through a lot in my career to get to this point, but I'd say that right now, this is just the beginning. And so I'm very excited to hit my first training camp, and I'm very excited to go in right now and watch the tape of what happened today at practice. How hard's that? How hard is that? In all seriousness. One texter says, that is something cocky that I would expect Shedeur Sanders to say. Cam is fitting right in with the toxic positivity, the Callahan runoff effect. And if I'm Callahan and I hear that, I am putting him in a spot to fail so that he'll lose all confidence to see how he responds. Got to humble him and know that he isn't Superman so that he will take to the coaching. I don't think these guys plan on humbling Cam Ward very much. The game will humble him enough. Again, when it comes to Levis, Levis put out Levis put out a mayonnaise video today. And I'm like, okay. So some people never learn. But again, when it comes to confidence and everything else, you can't be confident about something you haven't done. One texter says, Jared, they asked him about his confidence, not what his confidence should be according to those around him. Also, your GPA is based in fact, while his perception of his confidence in himself has nothing to do with anybody else. He believes in himself and his talent, whether you want to spend a segment whining about it or not. LOL. He believes in himself and his talent. Again, what did the Belichick book say? You can't just go get confidence off the shelf. You can't just make yourself confident. But I guess Cam Ward knows everything with his incredible array of experience, and Bill Belichick, although Bill's done some crazy stuff lately, knows nothing. One texter says, would Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes say that they are confident 10 out of 10? Overconfidence and arrogance are not assets. Let me ask you guys this question. I think Mahomes is pretty good, right? Like if Mahomes were to sit there and say today, you know what? If he were to go Barry Sanders on everybody and say, you know, I've had a nice career, and I made a bunch of money, but I've had enough with football. Guys, enjoy. Good luck, Andy. If Mahomes were to retire, he'd go right to the Hall of Fame. 5 years from now, everybody knows it. Do you think Mahomes was a 10 out of 10 in confidence in the second half of that Super Bowl? When he was getting pummeled the entire time? Go back and watch the Brady documentary. When they were down 28-3 in the Super Bowl, Tom Brady did not say, hey, I knew we were one play away from getting back in the game. Tom Brady said, at this point, I'm just looking up at the scoreboard saying, well, let's just try to close the gap as much as possible so it doesn't look like a complete and total embarrassment in the end. Would you say that was a 10 out of 10 in confidence? Again, when I hear, oh, I'm a gunslinger. Again, okay, Brett Favre. Remember last year when people were talking about Levis and the dumb stuff he was doing on the field? And it was like, well, Brett Favre does that. I remember that. So stupid. Oh, my goodness gracious. One texter said, but good news, he knows how to smack talk. Yeah, that is true. Again, he and Jeffrey Simmons vying for the Smack Talker of the Year award. You know, Simmons, he's so confident that when it comes to getting sacks, he can't do it. He just blames other people for why he can't. What a great culture. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Once again, confidence comes from doing. But there is one guy who I am starting to get a lot of confidence in. I am starting to become a huge fan of. And I think it will kind of shock you. We'll get to that next. Stillman Company, 1025, 106 for the game.
9-point lead. They get it in. J-Dub fires from 40, no good. And the Pacers hang on. They beat Oklahoma City 116-107 and have grabbed a 2-1 lead in the NBA Finals against the best team in the NBA all season long.
There you go. Indiana wins game 3 last night. And I know. I have been complaining and bitching about the NBA and the NBA Finals for the last, couple of weeks. And, I get on Joe Rexroad because Joe's like, today's NBA is so much better than the NBA used to be. And every time he says that, every single person on the planet boos him. It's like Joe gets on his NBA high horse. It's like, boo! And I'm still booing. I mean, the idea that the NBA is anything like it used to be. Those dudes used to be tough. Now, not as much. But I'm going to say this. I did watch game 3 last night. David James, did you watch game 3?
I did.
I'm not surprised by that. But if it was somebody else or other people in that spot, I might be a little surprised. Not surprised that David James did. I have not seen the ratings yet for game 3. Have we seen I know you probably haven't been looking for it, James, but have we seen the rating for last night?
I have not. I can double check though for you.
So I am kind of fascinated by this. I said I thought it was going to be 8.24 million. I actually think it's going to be, I think it cracked 9 maybe. We shall see. Let's see. Game 2 of the NBA Finals. Okay, so I don't see. Despite a close game and an unexpected outcome, the NBA Finals audience is the lowest for the second straight game as Thunder Pacers declines by 20%. Let's see what okay, 9.19 million. So it cracked 9, which is better than it had been, and I expected that it would crack 9. Now, I figured it'd be a little bit higher than that because the game was so close last night. But after all the complaining and all the bitching I've done about the NBA, I'm not going to lie to you, I got into the game last night. I kind of had to watch it because I was on Sirius from 11 to 2 today, and I'll be on Sirius tomorrow from 11 to 2. And while I guess I probably could have talked football or other stuff, I mean, it really only made sense to be talking basketball after an NBA Finals game. 9 million people watched yesterday. I know it's not the same as a Sunday night football game that'll get 15 million or an NFL playoff game that'll get 50 million, but it's still the highest rated show of the day. So I watched the game last night in part because I kind of felt like I had to. I got into it. And I have gotten into the Pacers. And I'm going to tell you why I've gotten into the Pacers. I've gotten into the Pacers because I think I love this Tyrese Halliburton. And apparently, according to The Athletic, they did a player poll where they surveyed the players. And you always see this, like, which team would you want to play for? Which coach would you want to play for? Which stadium's a good stadium? And the most overrated player, according to The Athletic's player poll, was Tyrese Halliburton. And so when it comes to Tyrese Halliburton, all I know about this guy is that Tyrese Halliburton was voted as the most overrated player by his peers. And then I just kind of watching the playoffs, again, not super in depth, but just from afar. And I see Tyrese Halliburton in Indiana beat the crap out of Giannis in the first round. They took out Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland in the second round. They beat the New York Knicks with Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns in the third round. And now this Oklahoma City team with the league MVP SGA on it, and a team that, again, won something like 68 games in the regular season, rolled through the Western Conference. He's kicking their ass too. And I'm thinking to myself, how is this guy the most overrated player? If you think he's the most overrated player, then he actually might be the most underrated player because all the players think he stinks, and then he goes out there and he's just murdering them. I mean, he is the Michael Corleone of the NBA right now. And I watched that game last night. And again, all I ask for is good, competitive team basketball. That's it. I don't like super teams. I don't like that Miami Heat team with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh and LeBron. I don't like the crybaby stuff. I just want tough, competitive, physical basketball. That's all I want. And last night, That was a good competitive game. Now, it went on a little later than I would have liked because I think it ended around 10:30 or something, but I actually felt the intensity of the game was worth staying up for. And the better team won last night. The best player on the floor was Tyrese Halliburton. Again, the most overrated player according to the Athletics player poll. And so when it comes to the basketball bennies and all the finger wagging, Joe, all the finger wagging the basketball bennies have been doing over the last couple of weeks when it comes to this NBA final series, saying, if you don't care about this final series, OKC and Indiana, then you just don't like basketball. I believe that take is ridiculous. Again, I grew up during Michael Jordan, and I loved Michael Jordan. So much so that I hated Kobe and Shaq because in 2000, in the Western Conference Finals, I was rooting for Portland because Scottie Pippen was on the Blazers. So I hated Kobe and Shaq, and I watched them, and I remember the wars that they had with with Sacramento and with Portland, and we later learned that Sacramento series may have been cooked, the books a little bit. But again, I watched Kobe. And then LeBron came in, and I liked LeBron in Cleveland, and then I hated LeBron in Miami, and then I liked LeBron again in Cleveland, and now I'm indifferent to LeBron in Los Angeles, and I liked Steph Curry, and then I hated basketball when Kevin Durant made it uncompetitive by going to Golden State. And so, again, I like college basketball. I like March Madness. I've worked in basketball. I've been on the radio in the #1 college basketball market in America. I like basketball. So I don't want to hear from these Joe Rexroads and Michelle Beatles and the basketball bennies out there that say, if you don't like this series, you don't like basketball. I like basketball just fine. I've always liked basketball just fine. But you got to give me a reason to watch. And until last night, I didn't feel like there was a really competitive reason to watch, or I say compelling reason to watch. And game 2 was like watching paint dry. Last night, game 3, that was an entertaining game. And this storyline that these players, and again, players don't know anything other than what it is they're supposed to do. Floyd once told me, I forget what Derek or Chris said. One of them said something crazy. And it was during a commercial break, and I looked at Floyd, I said, Derek said today, or Chris said today, again, something crazy. And I love them, but they say crazy things. And I said, they said this such and such. And Floyd looks at me and goes, yeah, players, he goes, players don't know. And then he said a word you can't say on the radio. Stuff. And I laughed. He's like, players know what they did. So when it comes to punt returning, Derek talks, he's like, listen to that. But when it comes to the technique of a right guard, he's like, players, they don't know. And considering that the ESPN player poll said that Josh Allen, the league MVP, was the most overrated player in a league that has Tua in it, tells me once again, these players, they don't know. These guys are going to tell me Tyrese Halliburton's the most overrated player. And then Tyrese Halliburton is going to go into the playoffs and light everybody up on fire. So now this has given me a reason to care about this basketball series and a reason to get excited to watch it because I am now a Pacer fan. I am now a Tyrese Halliburton fan. Again, keep sticking that foot up people's rear ends if they say you stink. I love it. You guys talk about that dog. Oh, he's got that dog in him. When you've got your entire group of peers telling you that you suck, even though you know you don't suck, and then you go out there and you light them on fire, that to me is something. That to me, that's stones. And so I'm in. I'm in on Halliburton. I'm now a Pacer fan for the next week and a half. And again, all I want when it comes to the NBA Finals and basketball, all I want is just a good, competitive, entertaining series. And at the beginning of this series, I saw a graphic on ESPN this morning. OKC was minus 700 to win the NBA Finals. This time yesterday, OKC was minus 550. This morning, they were minus 240. That tells me even though OKC is still the favorite, it is a competitive series, which again is what I want. Competitive basketball. That's it. Caleb says, it does not shock me that you're not a fan of Kevin Durant being a free agent and going to the best option he had and winning. As good as that Warriors team was, he made them a top 5 team of all time, and it was because of KD, not Steph. Kevin Durant is the biggest crybaby in all of basketball. I'm sorry. Now he wants out of Phoenix where they didn't make the playoffs. Kevin Durant was at OKC, and they had a squad that went to Game 7 with Golden State, and then he basically put in the game genie and cheated their way to the top. Well, he was a free agent. He'd go wherever he wants. Right. Again, what am I asking for here? Competitive basketball. Agreed. I mean, hey, what's stopping all the best free agents from going to the same team? But I find that to be such a loser mentality. What if Jordan had left Chicago and joined the Pistons? We don't want that. So, yes, I hated it. And I thought for about a 4 or 5 year period, it really ruined the NBA. And I'm not sure the NBA has ever recovered. Again, right now, the NBA is drawing 9 million viewers. If you go back to what they were, LeBron versus Golden State, when it was a fair fight, it was like 30 million viewers. So I'm not sure they've ever really recovered. 615-737-1025, Stillman & Company, 1025 The Game. Stillman and Company, again, I did get into the NBA last night. I enjoyed it. I will be watching the Stanley Cup final tonight, game number 4. It kind of feels like Edmonton has to win tonight. They're going back to Stuart Skinner in net. With Stuart Skinner, he either gives up 7 goals or he pitches the shutout. I have no idea what's going to happen tonight. I'll just say this. Last year, Edmonton got down 3-0, and they came back. And you know how I feel about momentum in hockey series, which is it doesn't exist. There's no momentum game to game. Just because you lost 18-0 yesterday means nothing for the start of the next game. It's never been that way. Home ice doesn't matter. None of that stuff matters. It basically matters who's going to score the first goal. That said, I kind of feel like if Edmonton doesn't win tonight, down 3-1, going back to Edmonton with this Florida team, these guys that have no pressure on them because they won the cup last year, these guys are stone cold killers. And not only that, but they picked up Brad Marchand and Seth Jones, and they picked up these guys to just fit in perfectly. Like, they're not asking Brad Marchand to save their team. They're asking him to be a third-line pest and score some goals here and there, and it's working. They've asked Seth Jones, hey, just be the second guy on the first pair. And it's working. If they get down 3-1, it's over. And I want, like I said with basketball, I want a competitive series. So when it comes to hockey, I want a competitive series. That said, and I do not know what the odds are for tonight, but I am going to take Florida. And I'm going to take Florida, and I'm not going to expect them to win big because I think that this is kind of Custer's last stand. When it comes to the Edmonton Oilers, I don't think, even though they came back from down 3-0 last year, I don't think that they can, finish the deal and do it again. I'll take Florida tonight, and I don't think we're going to have a fun, competitive Stanley Cup final. So we shall see. Also, William on the YouTube chat says, we have an NBA team here in Tennessee. Why are you a Pacer fan? I'm a Pacer fan right now in the NBA playoffs. I'm not an actual Pacer fan. I'm an Orlando Magic fan, because my friend is in the front office there. But I am not like a real Pacer fan. I'm just rooting for the Pacers over OKC. That's it for us. We're out of here. Tomorrow, Fireball Hot Take Friday, 2 o'clock, Stillman and Company. We will see you then.